Chapter 690. They finally made a move. Feng Xiangtian sighed helplessly. The state preceptor of the Huaxia Empire, who was also a disciple of supporting Xian Island, came back to ask for help. In fact, there was no need for him to come back to report. Supporting Xian Island already knew about Shi Wenguang's rebellion. Since Yu Qianshou said it himself, supporting Xian Island had sent people to secretly monitor it. The so-called secret surveillance was to secretly find an opportunity to assassinate Shi Wenguang and his son, as long as they did it secretly. Even if Yu Qianshou came looking for supporting Immortal Island could just push the matter aside and say that they didn't do it and that someone might have deliberately framed them to sow discord. Don't think that the world's #1 sect wouldn't do shady things. With the support of strength, shady things would be even more secretive. However, the people they sent reported that Shi Wenguang had many crossing tribulation experts protecting him. The strangest thing was that these crossing tribulation experts were unfamiliar faces. They had never seen them in the Huaxia cultivation world. The higher-ups of Fuxian Island immediately thought of a possibility, which was that Yu Qianshou had borrowed manpower from another nation's forces. It should be known that the other countries had a lord overseeing them. The lord who could control a territory was basically at the spirit-severing intermediate stage. This wasn't something that supporting Xian Island dared to act recklessly. The spirit-severing experts hadn't come yet. If they attracted them, it would be too late. Thus, the assassins were called back. Inside the house, a group of elders of supporting Xian Island gathered. Guan Weiwu lowered his head and didn't say anything. The others glanced at Fernand from time to time. Fernand's current situation in supporting Xian Island was very delicate. Perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as awkward. If it wasn't for Ma Jugu's protection, he would have lost his position. We shouldn't have expelled Yu Qianshou from the sect. At that time, he had already displayed outstanding cultivation talent. But what did we do? We are ashamed to face the ancestors of the supporting Immortal Island. Elder Mo of the Equipment Refining Pavilion, who was sitting beside Ferdinand, grumbled softly. Feng Xiangtian glared at him coldly. If he was to be held accountable for expelling Yu Qianshou from the sect, he, as the sect leader, would have to bear the blame, because he was the one who insisted on expelling Yu Qianshou from the sect. The reason was naturally because Yu Qianshou, a mere disciple, dared to challenge the prestige of a sect leader like him. Elder Mo's grumbling was no different from blaming him, the sect master. The cultivation pavilion's principal elder, O.C. Hai, immediately shouted, "We are discussing how to deal with this matter, not letting you fart overnight." He came out to smooth things over. Then he looked around and said, "This Yu Qianshou first gathered the 10,000 demons and the Moon Clan to wipe out the Daoyuo sect. Now, he wants to take over the throne in the secular world. What is he trying to do?" No one could answer this question. There was a short silence in the room. After a while, Dongfang Chang'o said slowly, "I heard that Yu Qianshou killed Luo Guang and 13 other masters in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage in the Daoyuo sect. I don't know if it is true or not." O.C. Hai's face twitched, and he said in a low voice, "Since he can be called the #1 master below the soul formation stage by the masters in the final phase of the soul formation stage, he must have the ability to do so." Then he asked Feng Xiangtian, "Sect leader, what do the Tianqing Pavilion's masters think?" Feng Xiangtian shook his head slightly and said, "What they mean is that they have no opinion on any decision we make. In fact, what Guan Dinghai meant was that if there was no other way, they could only bear with it for now and give up this fat piece of meat in the secular world." Although the consecrators had this intention, he couldn't tell the others that the consecrators had also given in. This would damage the dignity of the consecrators. Everyone looked at each other and didn't say it out loud. They already knew what the masters meant. In the end, it was O.C. Hai who said, "I think it's fine to give up the imperial power in the secular world. Just take it as a stopgap measure. If there's a chance in the future, we can take it back. What do you think?" It wasn't good to let the old masters take the blame, and it wasn't good to let the sect leader take the blame. As an elder of the cultivation pavilion, his weight was lower than the other two, but higher than the others. He was the best candidate to take the blame. This was called knowing one's own limits. Everyone shook their heads and expressed that they had no opinion. Feng Xiangtian heaved a sigh of relief and sighed. Since it is everyone's decision, then let it be. There is no need to send the imperial advisor to the Li dynasty. Bear with it for now and don't have any conflict with Yu Qianshou. Everyone is dismissed. Go to your own things. The news of Yu Qianshou wiping out the Daluo sect not only spread throughout the Huaxia cultivation world, but also to the various countries. The cultivators of the various countries didn't care about it, since it had nothing to do with them. However, they felt that it was in line with that butcher style. TSK. Wiping out nearly 20,000 disciples. A butcher is a butcher. In the Spirit Feng Valley, in Lu Yanqing's personal alchemy room in the medicine hut, the Allure Beauty and Yin, you were helping Lu Yanqing organize the various spiritual herbs. Lu Yanqing stood at the side with a solemn expression and looked at the two busy women. Suddenly, she said, I have some news about Yu Qianshou in the Huaxia cultivation world. Do you want to hear it? The two women were stunned. After looking at each other, they nodded slightly, indicating that they wanted to hear it. Lu Yanqing immediately frowned and told the two about Yu Qianshou wiping out the Daluo sect. Yin Yu was shocked. She didn't expect Yu Qianshou to kill so many people. The Allure Beauty was in a daze for a long time. Her eyes gradually became moist. He had finally avenged her and accomplished what she wanted to do, but couldn't. In the bamboo forest of Utopia, Yu Qianshou quietly appeared in the courtyard. Just as he walked around, he suddenly heard someone ask in the bamboo house, Who is it? Someone lives here? Yu Qianshou was stunned, but when he saw Shui Qingkong walking out of the house, he suddenly realized that he had almost forgotten that Bai Sujin's uncle was still here. So he smiled and cupped his hands, saying, Senior Shui, are you used to living here? So it's the leader. Shui Qingkong quickly bowed. He had stayed in Utopia for a long time, so he naturally knew Yu Qianshou's position in Utopia. After standing up, he replied, It's very quiet here. It's a good place to live. I should thank the leader for taking me in. May I know what instructions the leader has for coming here? Yu Qianshou pointed behind and said, Nothing much. Go to the grave at the back and pay your respects. Shui Qingkong was slightly surprised. He hadn't come to pay his respects for so many years. Why did he suddenly come today? There must be a special reason. Thus, he cupped his hands and said, Then I'll go out and take a walk. Please help yourself, leader. Yu Qianshou smiled and nodded, watching him leave. Then he looked around the quiet bamboo forest and could not help but feel a little emotional. The bamboo forest and bamboo houses here were built by him and by Sujin. Back then, there were only the two of them in the whole of Utopia. After reminiscing for a while, he stepped on the thick bamboo leaves and walked to the back of the bamboo house. The back of the bamboo house was empty, and a grave stood there conspicuously. The surroundings were very clean, and there were new marks on the grave. There was not even a single weed. Clearly, someone had cleaned it often. Yu Qianshou walked to the front of the tombstone, slowly knelt down, and kowtowed 3 times. Then he sat on the ground and leaned against the tombstone with a smile, saying, Old man, I haven't come to see you for a long time. Don't be angry. It's not that I forgot or didn't want to see you, but that I didn't avenge you, so I don't have the face to see you. Today, I'm here to tell you good news. The Daluo sect was destroyed by me, and I killed the person who killed you. Although it took me more than 20 years to avenge you, I've finally avenged you, right? Don't nag at me anymore. He raised his hand and took out a head from his storage bag. He raised it and shook it. Old man, do you see this? This is Zhu Xianxian, who killed you. I brought his head. Originally, I wanted to use it as a memorial to you, but I think you don't want to see this face, so I might as well just throw it away and save you the trouble. As he spoke, a green flame appeared in his palm, instantly burning the head to ashes. He took out a wine flask, opened the lid, and placed it on the ground. Clear wine flowed out, and the fragrance of wine wafted in the surroundings. Old man, it's been a long time since I drank with you. Yu Qianshou also took out a jar of wine and drank it heartily. He leaned against the tombstone and kept muttering to himself, recounting his experiences over the years to the person who had died many years ago. Old man, I haven't drunk with you for a long time. Yu Qianshou also took out a jar of wine and drank it to his heart's content. He leaned against the tombstone and kept muttering to himself, recounting his experiences over the years to the person who had died many years ago. He recounted all the ups and downs he had experienced over the years. He even grumbled about the grievances that outsiders couldn't see, as if he was a child complaining to an adult. Leaning against the tombstone, his expression alternated between excitement, depression, pride, and sobbing. He seemed deranged, like a shameless madman. Towards the end, he actually started crying. He hugged the wine jar and drank the wine, crying bitterly. His face was covered with water, and it was hard to tell if it was wine or tears. He was still drinking the wine, and it was a very strong kind of wine. If outsiders were to see this, who would believe that this was the scum of the cultivation world who did all kinds of evil? Who would believe that this was the butcher of the cultivation world who killed people like flies? As the smell of wine filled the air, a bright moon rose above the bamboo forest. He was still muttering weakly. A graceful white figure gently walked over. Under the illumination of the moonlight, Bai Sujin's gentle and peerless face revealed a pitiful expression as she silently looked at him. Xue Qingkong only came back after dark. She thought that Yu Qianqiu must have left, but when she came back, she heard him crying bitterly behind her. She was shocked and immediately went to the Misty Palace to inform Bai Sujin. That was why Bai Sujin appeared here. In a daze, Yu Qianqiu vaguely saw a white-robed person standing in the moonlight. He struggled to open his eyes, and when he saw that it was Bai Sujin, he immediately woke up. He picked up the wine jar and looked at it. He muttered, "Damn it, it's not easy being a cultivator. I've drunk so much, but I can't even get drunk." In the blink of an eye, he returned to his playful and angry self. Chapter 691. The hint of pity on Bai Sujin's face also disappeared the moment he stood up. A gentle smile appeared on her face as she asked softly, "Why did you come here alone? Let me hug you first, then I will tell you." Yu Qianqiu revealed a sinister smile. Bai Sujin pointed at his wet body and shook her head with a faint smile. Then, she gently opened her arms and took the initiative to hug him. Yu Qianqiu laughed and pulled her into his arms. He buried his head in her soft neck and enjoyed a deep breath, inhaling the faint fragrance of her body into his lungs. He murmured, "It's so comfortable. Your chest is also very elastic. I will find a chance to peel it off and see." Bai Sujin also hugged him gently, allowing him to say frivolous words without saying anything. In the bamboo forest under the moonlight, the two tightly hugged each other as if they never wanted to be separated. The only inharmonious scene was the lonely grave on the side. After a long time, Yu Qianqiu was so comfortable that he almost fell asleep standing up. Suddenly, he heard Bai Sujin ask softly in his ear, "Have you come to pay respects to your master?" "Yes." Yu Qianqiu was too lazy to reply at this time, so he softly answered through his nose. "Have you avenged your master?" Bai Sujin asked. "Yes." Yu Qianqiu buried his head in her neck, still motionless. "Killed many people?" Bai Sujin asked hesitantly. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and pushed her away. He looked at her face and asked curiously, "How do you know?" Bai Sujin smiled sweetly, and her eyes flashed. She wanted to say that she guessed it from his actions in front of House Sanxi's grave, but she changed her words and said in a low voice, "I remember that there are many people in the Daoyuo sect. If you really took revenge, you must have killed many people." Yu Qianqiu said in his heart, "Bosom friend." He shrugged his shoulders indifferently and pulled her hand. "Let's go for a walk." Bai Sujin gently pulled him back and shook her head. "It's rare for you to come back. You should go and accompany Chu Ping." Yu Qianqiu glanced at her and let go of her hand. He took out a jar of wine and popped a small hole near the bottom. The sparkling wine flowed out in a thin stream. He walked to the front of the grave and placed the jug of wine on the tombstone. He chuckled and said, "Old man, I won't accompany you anymore. Drink slowly." The wine flowed down the tombstone. Then, without saying anything, he walked to Bai Sujin's side and forcefully dragged her away. They walked hand in hand through the bamboo forest and slowly walked forward. They didn't know how long they had walked, but they didn't say a word. After they walked to the lake, They sat down on the grass by the lake. Yu Qianqiu lay down lazily with his head on by Sujin's thigh and looked at the stars in the sky. He didn't know when he took a bite of grass and chewed it. Seeing that he was chewing grass so happily, Bai Sujin thought of cows eating grass. So she kept pulling out grass and piling it on his stomach until he looked like a big belly woman. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. She was playful and kept burying him with grass. Yu Qianqiu was distracted and didn't notice that he was covered with grass. He looked at the countless twinkling stars in the sky, but his mind was thinking about his women. Finally, he thought of Yin Yu and was slightly startled. He wondered how she and the Enchantress of 100 Charms were doing in the Lingfang Valley. Bai Sujin also noticed his abnormality and finally asked, "What's wrong?" Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses and immediately found that he was covered with grass. He rolled his eyes and said, "Beauty, are you afraid of being discovered by others, so you want to destroy my body to destroy the evidence?" He reached out his hand to tickle Bai Sujin's armpit. Bai Sujin twisted her body and giggled like a silver bell. "No, no." Yu Qianqiu let her go, but he pointed to his face and said with a sinister smile, "Murdering an adulterer is a heinous crime. I punish you by kissing me. What an unreasonable punishment. Let me think about whether I should execute it or not." Bai Sujin tilted her head and thought for a while. Then, she gently lowered her head and slowly pressed her soft red lips on Yu Qianqiu's forehead. She stayed for a while before leaving. Yu Qianqiu smiled proudly and sat up. He said, "I'm leaving. Don't tell others that I've been back." Bai Sujin looked at him quietly for a while and nodded slightly. Yu Qianqiu let out a self-deprecating laugh, hugged Bai Sujin's face, and gave her a kiss before vanishing. Bai Sujin sat alone by the lake for a long time. She looked at the moon in the sky with a gentle smile from time to time and kept fiddling with the pile of grass. Finally, she picked up a pile of grass and sprinkled it all over the sky. Then, she slowly rose into the sky and flew through the drifting grass, like Chong, flying to the moon, towards the misty palace high up in the sky. Shuntian Island under the moonlight had a unique charm. The moonlight and starlight were also reflected in the boundless lake, which made people mistakenly think that Shuntian Island was floating in the vast sea of stars. It was a beautiful sight. Furong and Zi would never get tired of looking at this beautiful scenery. The two girls foolishly laid on the grass by the lake and counted the stars. However, they messed up their count, so they started over again. Their behavior was similar to someone's behavior in a faraway place. On the roof, Bai Changchun stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the stars in the distance. Nongzhu sat comfortably on the side and said, "Old Bai, you're finally back. I thought you were really going to stay in front of the 9th Netherworld cave. Of all the things you like, why do you like to fight?" Bai Changchun slowly replied, "I've already told the Ghost King outside the 9th Netherworld cave that if there are more people from the underworld coming out from the 9th Netherworld cave, just lead them here. I'll be there any time." "Ugh, you're crazy." Nongzhu suddenly stood up. She couldn't be comfortable anymore. She looked around with some lingering fear and said, "You're crazy. You're not afraid. But we can't be compared to you. What if the masters from the underworld suddenly come? Won't we be in trouble? Don't worry. As long as someone from the underworld comes out, I'll know in advance. You can also leave in advance." Bai Changchun looked away from the distant starry sky and fell on Furong, who was counting the stars by the lake. He said quietly, "When you leave, remember to take Furong with you to your purple bamboo forest." Hearing the first part of his words, Nongzhu was just relieved. But when she heard the second part, her heart tightened again. She asked suspiciously, "Old Bai, tell me honestly, if there are some top masters from the underworld, are you sure you could defeat them?" Bai Changchu nodded calmly and said, "Yes, I'm not sure. After all, we haven't seen how strong the real masters from the underworld are. But I'm still eager for a fight. The stronger the opponent, the better. It's best if he can force me into a desperate situation. I've been exploring another way of cultivation by myself, without any reference. I want to improve my strength, but I don't know where to start. Only when I meet someone stronger than me, the stronger the better. Only when I experience a fight like that with all my strength, I believe I can find a way to improve my strength by leaps and bounds and break through the realm that I've been wanting to touch. Nongju was dumbfounded. She swallowed hard and said, "Your cultivation has reached this level, and there's still a chance to improve by leaps and bounds? Then what kind of realm is that?" "The Tao. The Tao." By Changchun murmured, "The Tao can be Tao, is not the Tao." Nongju was confused and said with confusion, "What Tao can be Tao and is not the Tao? Oh, Bai, what are you talking about?" If Yu Qianqiu had heard this, he would have doubted whether Bai Changchun was also a time traveler. The Tao can be Tao, but is not the Tao. Isn't it from the Tao Te Ching? Although he couldn't recite the whole Tao Te Ching, he could casually say the first few sentences. Bai Changchun shook his head slowly and said, "I don't know myself. I only feel that I've touched something, but I can't understand it clearly. So I need to fight with all my strength. Maybe the enlightenment is only at the moment of the battle. My self-enlightenment cultivation method is different from yours. Once I have an epiphany, my cultivation will reach another realm in a flash." Compared with the previous realm, it's not too much to describe it as like the clouds and mud. Nongju's mouth was wide open. He even doubted whether he had heard it wrong. Bai Changchun's current cultivation was already terrifying enough. Once he broke through to a new realm, the original horrifying cultivation would be like the mud, while the new realm would be as noble as the clouds. One was in the sky, while the other was on the ground. Was there such a huge difference in cultivation? "Old Bai, are you kidding?" Although Nongju knew that Bai Changchun wouldn't lie, he still couldn't help asking. Bai Changchun didn't pay any more attention to him. He stared at the night sky and murmured to himself, "Maybe the new realm can make me reborn and rebuild my body." Nongju was completely dumbfounded. He looked at Bai Changchun as if he was a monster. Yu Qianqiu suddenly appeared in a hidden call not far from the spirit-fragrant valley. He floated to the top of a large tree at the top of the mountain and looked around. His gaze locked onto a valley with flickering lights. Those lights were not real lights, but the fluorescent stones that were commonly used by cultivators. Obviously, that valley was Ling Fong Valley. It was impossible for ordinary people to use fluorescent stones, which were only used by cultivators, in such a deep mountain. The basis of this judgment was a silver ball that was set up by the scouts in Ling Fong Valley. He came here to see how the temptress and Yin you were doing in Ling Fong Valley. The most important reason was that he himself didn't know why, but he wanted to tell the 100 Charms Enchantress that he had already avenged his master, House Sansi. However, he didn't know that the temptress already knew about this. In fact, the two of them had the silver ball that he gave them when they parted at Cornucopia. The two of them didn't know the use of this silver ball. In fact, it was given by Yu Qianqiu to make it easier for him to find them. He didn't want to tell them that it was for this reason, so the two of them mistook it as a commemorative item. He had found their location in Utopia, so he could easily appear beside them. However, there were two soul formation experts here, and he was afraid that it would cause some misunderstanding if he appeared too abruptly. After all, it wasn't a good thing to barge into someone's sleeping place in the middle of the night, especially when there was the world's most beautiful woman around. To be honest, ever since Lu Yanqing ruined his plans at Cornucopia, he didn't like this self-proclaimed world's most beautiful woman. Using her beauty as capital to ruin other people's plans, what a problem. If you have the ability, show me your true abilities, then I'll be convinced. Chapter 692. His idea was to fly slowly from a distance. With the cultivation of the two spirit-severing experts, it would not be difficult for them to find him. When they met, he would explain his purpose of coming, and naturally, there would not be any misunderstanding. Just as he was about to fly towards Ling Fong Valley, he suddenly saw a shadow flashing in the light. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously hid in the branches and leaves under his feet. Usually it was easy to see things clearly in the light from the dark, but it was difficult to see things clearly in the dark from a light. As soon as Yu Qianqiu hid himself, he regretted it. He had been too careful. He had intended to come here openly. If he had been discovered by others while hiding, it would have been strange if others did not think that he had bad intentions. Yu Qianqiu wanted to show himself. but he found that the shadow was flying towards him. So, he decided to hide quietly and held his breath, waiting for the person to leave. He believed that as long as he did not move, it would be difficult for others to find him. The person who flew over did not leave, but landed on the tree where Yu Qianqiu was hiding. It was probably because the tree was too conspicuous. Yu Qianqiu looked up and saw the person above. He suddenly felt relieved. It was none other than his old friend, Third Xian. This old man was in a good mood. He came out to see the scenery so late at night. He really did not have a normal brain. Yu Qianqiu looked at Third Xian, who was looking around. He was secretly happy and was about to scare him, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Look at this old man. Why does he feel a little sneaky? What is this old man trying to do? Is he going to have an affair in the middle of the night? Yu Qianqiu's face revealed a lewd smile. He was just thinking about it. Based on his understanding of Third Xian's forthright character, he would not have an affair. He would only meet his lover openly. Third brother Xian, who was on the treetop, had already flown to the call where he jumped out from. He pushed aside a pile of wormwood and carried out 2 women. He held one in each of his arms and once again looked around furtively. Then, he quickly sneaked into the depths of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu hid in the bushes with a dumbfounded expression. He blinked his eyes in disbelief, thinking that his eyes were playing tricks on him. But with the bright moon in the sky, he was sure that third brother Xian had carried out 2 women, and they were 2 young girls. One of them was even wearing a typical white dress. There was no mistaking it. Sure enough, it's hard to know a person's heart. You may know a person's face, but you don't know his heart. What did it mean to appear loyal, but have a treacherous heart? That was exactly what this old fellow was talking about. He actually dared to challenge 2 people in the wilderness. Mother asterisk her, his character. I have to go and admire him and catch him in the act. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands excitedly. He winked and grinned evilly as he dashed out in the direction that third brother Xian had gone. He was afraid of startling third brother Xian, so he was very careful along the way. Along the way, he changed into a pure black knight suit. But he found out that third brother Xian was even more careful than him. Third brother Xian would often stop and hide in the dark, watching for any movement. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu, was not just a normal kind of sinister in this aspect. When he sensed that something was wrong, he stopped and hid like an experienced spy. The 2 of them acted like spies. Under the moonlight, the terrain was hazy and twisted, undulating. It was difficult for people who were not familiar with the terrain to move freely. Even though he was experienced in sneaking around, he still almost lost third brother Xian a few times. If it wasn't for the fact that third brother Xian's speed was not very fast, it would have been difficult to keep up with him. After all, there was still a gap between their cultivation levels. Most importantly, the woman third brother Xian was carrying was wearing a white dress, which was very eye-catching under the moonlight. That was why he did not lose third brother Xian. Both of them sneaked into the vast mountains. The more Yu Qianqiu followed, the more he felt that something was wrong. His expression became serious. Even if third brother Xian was having an affair, there was no need for him to go so far. He was too careful. Was there need to go so far and to such a remote place? Now it didn't seem like an affair, but more like destroying the corpses. With this suspicion, he immediately remembered that the 2 girls seemed to be unconscious. He did not know if they were dead or alive. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and followed even more carefully. He smelled a trace of conspiracy. Another half an hour later, Yu Qianqiu, who was following closely behind, saw third brother Xian bring the 2 girls into a valley without hesitation. His heart immediately moved, and his intuition told him that they had arrived at their destination. He carefully sneaked into the dense forest and hid behind a tree where he could roughly see the situation in the valley. Under the moonlight, he could see 70 to 80% of the situation in the valley. It was a triangular valley sandwiched by 3 mountains. There was a stream flowing in the valley. Looking at the pebbles in the valley, it was obvious that it was the dry season of the stream. When the water was full, it could cover the entire bottom of the valley. Because of this, the valley looked very clean, Not even weeds could be seen. The pebbles at the bottom of the valley were flat and gray under the moonlight. The two girls that third brother Xian brought with him were lying on the ground. Where did third brother Xian go? Yu Qianqiu looked around suspiciously. He did not see third brother Xian return. Could it be that he was hiding somewhere? After waiting and observing for a while, he rubbed his chin and pondered. He felt that third brother Xian would not leave the two girls here for no reason. His gaze fell on two large rocks in the stream at the foot of the mountain. He then carefully and stealthily slipped down the slope of the mountain. He sneakily snuck behind the bushes beside the stream, and a ball of water surged out of his body and wrapped around his entire body. He then looked around to make sure there was no one around and quickly leaped into the stream. His entire body silently merged into the stream. The stream was not very deep. The deepest part was less than 4 meters. Yu Qianqiu quietly scuttled from the bottom of the water to the shadow between the two big rocks. Only then did he pop his head out to observe from the gap between the rocks. At this time, his hiding position was only about 30 meters away from the center of the valley. With his cultivation, he could easily see what was happening at the bottom of the valley. He wanted to see what third brother Xian was up to by bringing 2 women here in the middle of the night. Not long after, he found that 3 people came one after another. Each of them had 2 girls in their hands and placed them on the ground. Yu Qianqiu did not know these 3 people, but he found that he could not see through their cultivation. It was obvious that they were all higher than him, but from the clothes that they were wearing, he could tell that they were also people of Spirit Fong Valley. The 3 people left the girls in their hands and flew in the same direction. Could it be that it was not third brother Xian who was up to something, but the whole Spirit Fong Valley? Yu Qianqiu wanted to go in the direction where those people disappeared. But after thinking about it, he stopped. Since they left the girls here, they would obviously come back here. For safety's sake, it was better to wait here for a while. As he expected, after a while, he saw that the 3 people came back from the direction where they disappeared. But each of them was carrying a big basin that was dug out of a whole stone. Yu Qianqiu hid in the gap of the shadow of the stone and watched curiously. He did not know what these people were up to. He saw that the 3 people had just placed the 6 basins on the ground when third brother Xian also came over with a basin. And behind him, there was also a person, Yan Juixing. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened. He could not believe it. After repeatedly identifying it, he confirmed that it was Yan Juixing, that bastard. He could not believe that third brother Xian was with Yan Juixing. No, it should be said, how could Spirit Fong Valley be with Yan Juixing? Conspiracy. There must be a conspiracy. Yu Qianqiu's face was gloomy. That Lu Yanqing did not show her true face all day long. He should have known that she was not a good person. He was so annoyed that he wanted to vomit blood. He sent the Enchantress of 100 Charms and Yin Yu to Spirit Fong Valley. Isn't this sending them to a wolf's den? Yan Juixing slowly walked to the side of the 8 women on the ground. After looking at them, he nodded slightly and said, "You 4 brothers did a good job. When you came, you were not discovered by anyone, right?" "No." The 4 of them bowed together and replied. So these 4 guys were brothers. Sure enough, they were related to Lu Yanqing. Otherwise, how could Yan Juixing instruct her 4 disciples? The most poisonous woman's heart. As Yu Qianqiu was gnashing his teeth in hatred, he suddenly saw Yan Juixing give the 4 people a look. Yu Qianqiu was on alert. The water under his neck spread up and wrapped his head. He sank into the water and stuck close to the bottom of the stone. The 3 Xian brothers quickly flew to the mountains on 3 sides. They used their eyes and divine sense to scan the area. After confirming that there was nothing suspicious, they returned to report that everything was fine. And Yu Qianqiu quietly emerged from the bottom of the water. Not a drop of water could be seen on his head. His body was in the water, but not a drop of water could be seen. This could be considered as a magical thing about cultivating water arts. Yan Juixing instructed the 4 of them to position the 7 basins on the ground, while he shot a beam of black light at 7 of the 8 girls. The 7 girls woke up one after another, but when they saw the surrounding scene, they could not help but scream in fear. As a result, Yin Juexing's eyes suddenly flashed with red light. In an instant, the 7 girls' minds were captured. The 7 girls immediately stood up in a daze. They looked at Yin Juexing and began to take off their clothes with a silly smile. After a while, 7 exquisite white and tender bodies appeared under the bright moonlight. King Red-Eye Disease Bastard. Yu Qianqiu cursed with a twisted expression. He had experienced Yin Juexing's pair of red demon eyes, so he naturally knew its power. But what made him unbearable was that these girls were actually mortals. They were not people of the cultivation world at all. This bastard actually used demonic techniques on mortals and used such despicable means to desecrate mortals. At the same time, what puzzled Yu Qianqiu was that he found that Yin Juexing's cultivation was similar to his in the cornucopia, but now he could not see through it. Obviously, Yin Juexing's cultivation had broken through again. Such a godly cultivation speed, coupled with his vicious thoughts and methods. And most importantly, this person was opposing him, so he absolutely could not be allowed to live. Kill. Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed as he sized up the situation. He had already made preparations to launch a sneak attack. Chapter 693. Yin Juexing looked up at the night sky and didn't know what he was looking at. Then he walked to the middle of the 7 stone basins. The 3 brothers of Xian Laosan swept in 4 directions and stood still. At the same time, they looked around vigilantly as if they were guarding. The 7 naked girls walked towards the 7 arranged basins without feeling anything. One of them stepped into a stone basin, sat down, and lay on their side in the basin. Half of the basin was empty, and the other half was full of people. It felt a bit like the Taiji painting. The 7 basins were like plates with good dishes, and the girls inside were the dishes on the plates. Yu Qianqiu looked confused. He didn't know what Yin Juexing wanted to do. Under the starry sky, this scene looked like some kind of sacrifice. Did this jealous person want to sacrifice living people? After the 7 girls lay in the stone basin, Yin Juexing walked to a basin and took out a pot of 7-star blood orchid from the storage bag. He inserted one hand directly into the flower pot and dug out the blood orchid together with the soil. He carefully placed the empty flower pot outside the pot. Then he took out 6 pots of blood orchid and put them into the remaining 6 stone basins in the same way. When Yu Qianqiu saw the 7 pots of blood orchid, he was so angry that his teeth itched. Obviously, they were the 7 blood orchids that were bought from him. Although these 7 pots of blood orchid had grown very luxuriant, he was sure that they were his. The only thing that made him feel strange was that the flowers of the 7-star blood orchid were all white. Why were these 7 black flowers? He secretly pondered in his heart. It must be this jealous person who used some evil magic. Yin Juexing then sat cross-legged in the middle of the arranged stone basin. He looked straight ahead with cold eyes, and his body began to emit bursts of black mist. The black mist gradually spread and became thicker and thicker. It slowly enveloped the area within a radius of 10 meters. Yin Juexing's movement couldn't be seen at all. It was much thicker than the black mist released from his body before. Obviously, his demonic skills had made a lot of progress. A rolling black mist suddenly appeared in the valley under the starry sky. This scene looked a little strange, and an abnormal aura spread in all directions. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the water, couldn't help it. Now was a good opportunity. It was a good time to take advantage of the black mist to launch a sneak attack. But in the end, he still endured it. He wanted to see what this jealous person was doing. Maybe he could figure out what Ling Fong Valley was conspiring with this guy. Suddenly, 7 spots of red light appeared in the black mist, shining and swimming in it. At the same time, the black mist tumbled rapidly and quickly retracted. Yin Juexing's seated figure appeared once again. In the blink of an eye, the black mist condensed into 7 balls. The 7 balls tumbled and gradually took shape, forming 7 seemingly solid black snakes. They were black flying snakes. The snake's head flashed and danced around Yin Juexing. Yu Qianqiu had never seen such a strange scene before. Just as he was secretly alarmed, he suddenly saw Yin Juexing sit still and say go. The 7 black flying snakes bent their bodies and shot into the 7 stone basins with a whoosh, like arrows being shot from a crossbow. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the river, could see the blood splashing out from the 7 basins. His eyes immediately widened and his muscles tightened. He knew that the 7 girls were probably done for. He regretted not making a move earlier, but it was too late now. In order to find out, he bit his lips and resisted the urge to rush out. Because he was not only dealing with Yan Zhuixing, but also Ling Fong Valley, who was known for their good reputation. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. He could only comfort himself and suppress the boiling, killing intent in his chest. Yu Qianqiu was in a lower position, so he couldn't see what was happening in the basins. 7 bloody holes had appeared on the hearts of the 7 girls in the basins. Blood gushed into the stone basins like a fountain. More and more blood gathered in the basins, and the 7 girls became paler and paler. Their eyes slowly closed, and they fell asleep in their own pools of blood, never to open their eyes again. The roots of the 7-star blood orchid were soaked in the blood. It was as if they had absorbed the vitality of the girls and became more beautiful. The 7-star blood orchid had a miraculous effect. The sunflower could automatically correspond to the sun in the sky during the day, and the 7-star blood orchid could automatically correspond to the Big Dipper in the sky at night. In addition, its color was as bright as blood, and the smell it emitted was also the smell of blood, so it was called the 7-star blood orchid. Yu Qianqiu also knew the origin of the 7-star blood orchid's name. However, at this moment, the 7-star blood orchids in the stone basins were showing a miraculous scene. Bathed in the starry sky, the 7 small black flowers were moving slowly, corresponding to the Big Dipper in the night sky. On the hearts of the 7 girls who had died, the black flying snake drilled out of the bloody hole. It wandered in the pool of blood and slowly climbed to the edge of the stone basins. It just happened to circle around with its head and tail facing each other. It raised its head and hissed, as if it was waiting for something. Yan Zhuixing, who was sitting quietly, suddenly raised his arms and made a messy and complicated gesture. He shot 7 black lights into the 7 blood orchids, and then he chanted, "The light of the demon god, shine on the 7 stars. Remove the light, and take its magic. The flower of the blood demon, bloom brightly, and the magic of the stars, quickly absorb it." As soon as he finished speaking, the 7 small black flowers on the 7-star blood orchid suddenly trembled violently, and the thick smell of blood gradually spread around. After a long time, a majestic and unknown aura suddenly descended from the sky, and the entire valley gave people a very oppressive feeling in an instant. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the water, suddenly had a violent and uneasy mood. The light in the valley seemed to be a lot darker in an instant. Looking at the top of the 7 stone basins, there was a gray mist hovering 1 foot above them. It was getting thicker and darker. The 7 black snakes on the stone basins propped up their bodies and stuck their heads into the gray mist to greedily suck. Everything seemed so strange. Yu Qianqiu was still observing slowly at first. After waiting for an hour, Yan Zhuixing, who was sitting cross-legged, didn't move. He just quietly watched the 7 black snakes suck the gray mist with a smile. No, Yu Qianqiu's pupils suddenly shrank. He found that the 7 black snakes seemed to be slightly bigger than before. He immediately recalled the scene of Yan Zhuixing's body emitting black mist and condensing into a snake. The doubts in his mind were immediately dispelled, and his thoughts immediately became clear. The snake was originally condensed from the black mist released from Yan Zhuixing's body. Now, the snake was absorbing the gray mist summoned by the evil method to strengthen itself. In other words, Yan Zhuixing would also become stronger after absorbing the snake back into his body. This might be the secret of Yan Zhuixing's rapid cultivation increase. After understanding it, Yu Qianqiu immediately regretted it. He had sacrificed the lives of the 7 girls in vain. How could he sit back and watch Yan Zhuixing grow stronger? Walala! Countless black flying swords suddenly rose from the stream and shot out like a torrential downpour. This sudden movement startled the few people present. Yin Juexing even looked back in shock. He was a little dumbfounded to see so many flying swords suddenly emerging. At such a close distance, it was too late to escape. He quickly clapped his palms, and the 7 black snakes that sucked the gray mist quickly flew up and circled in front of him. They were like shields that bounced off the flying swords that were attacking Yin Juexing. Bang, bang, bang. There was a dense explosion sound on the beach. Although the flying snakes helped Yin Juexing to dodge the attack, the 7-star blood orchids in the 7 stone basins suffered a disaster. Not to mention the blood orchids, even the stone basins were shattered into pieces. My blood demon flower! Yin Juexing hugged his head and let out a shrill scream. He had never been so sad in his life. These 7 basins of blood orchids were the hope of his struggle. They were destroyed just like that. It was equivalent to destroying his hope. It was more painful than taking his life. It was simply heartbreaking. You dog, I can't even kill you like this. There was a curse in the stream. 2 bright small knives appeared in the hands of Exine Laosan and his brothers in an instant. It was similar to a guillotine used to cut herbs. 8 streams of light whizzed toward the place where Yu Qianshou was hiding without hesitation. A figure immediately popped out from behind the stone in the stream, and at the same time, a group of dense black shadows exploded. Xiao xiao, sounds were like rain, and the 8 streams of light that shot over were directly smashed into pieces. The 4 brothers didn't hesitate to rush over and attack the figure that popped up in the air. With their cultivation at the end of the tribulation stage, they arrived in an instant. The figure opened his arms and shouted, "Absorbing Star's great technique." The others didn't know what the Absorbing Star's great technique was, but Exine Laosan could be said to be engraved in his heart. He didn't have time to say anything and could only hurriedly shout, "Run!" He had already teleported back quickly. Maybe he was still worried, so he jumped into the stream to escape. However, the other 3 brothers were not so lucky. They had already entered the range of Yu Qianshou's power. Before they could react, 3 clouds of white mist exploded in the air and rushed into Yu Qianshou's sleeve. The 3 withered corpses fell to the ground with a thud. Yu Qianshou landed firmly on the ground. The black flying swords that he had released earlier flew back from all directions, forming a dense defensive formation around him. Yu Qianshou stared at Yin Juexing, who was holding his head for a long time, and snorted coldly. "Brother Yin, nice to meet you. It hasn't been long since we parted. I didn't expect to meet you here again." Exine Laosan's head popped out of the water. He stared at the 3 withered corpses on the ground and cried in pain, "5th brother, 6th brother, 7th brother." Although he was controlled by Yin Juexing and was loyal to him, he still had a normal mind. As long as it wasn't Yin Juexing's order, he could still distinguish between love and hate. He knew the pain of losing his brother. However, although he was sad, he was subconsciously afraid of Yu Qianshou and didn't dare to come over. Yin Juexing slowly released his hand and raised his head. His eyes that were staring at Yu Qianshou instantly turned red. He roared angrily, "Yu Qianshou, it's you." Yu Qianshou stared at the 7 black flying snakes that were quickly circling and flying to protect Yin Juexing. He squinted his eyes and said, "The demonic technique that you cultivate is really something. You can actually block my flying swords. Let's try again." Hundreds of black lights shot out like a torrential rain. Chapter 694. The 7 flying snakes moved like the wind and turned into 7 phantoms. Their speed was unbelievably fast, and they were extremely agile. They protected Yin Juexing so that not even a drop of water could get through. Dang, dang, dang. After a series of explosions, Yin Juexing didn't move at all and continued to stare at Yu Qianshou with hatred. "Damn you!" Yu Qianshou cursed in disbelief. His attack didn't have any effect, and the flying sword immediately rolled back to his side to protect him. The 7 flying snakes slowed down as well. They shook their heads and wagged their tails as they wriggled in the air. They looked at Yu Qianshou with ferocious expressions and their eyes shone with a frightening red light. To be honest, Yu Qianqiu had always been very confident in his black fire flying sword. It was invincible, and it had long become his trump card. Until now, most of the experts who had died in his hands had died under the black fire flying sword. He didn't expect to meet his nemesis today, 7 treasures. Yu Qianqiu's eyes revealed a look of envy, and he wanted to take them for himself. The flying sword was dead, but the 7 flying snakes were alive. Regardless of speed or agility, the flying sword couldn't compare to them. What was rare was that they were very sturdy. Even the sharpness of the black fire flying sword couldn't hurt them at all. Looking at the scene of them growing stronger by devouring them, it seemed like they could even level up and evolve. Damn! However, Yu Qianqiu also knew that he could only envy Yan Zhuixing. These 7 flying snakes weren't real animals that could be tamed. They were formed by Yan Zhuixing's demonic technique. Yu Qianqiu, you deserve to die 1,000 times. Yan Zhuixing gritted his teeth and spat out word by word. The sound of his bones cracking could be heard, deserving of 10,000 deaths. Yu Qianqiu's eyes fell on the pools of blood on the ground. Even the girl who was still in a coma was smashed into pieces by his flying sword. His heart slightly tightened, and his expression turned cold. He stared at Yan Zhuixing and said in a deep voice, "Last time, we didn't decide the winner, but you ran away with your tail between your legs. This time, don't run away if you have the guts. Let's see who will die first. Do you really think that I'm afraid of you and will run away?" Yan Zhuixing sneered with a face full of resentment. "I'm only interested in the hero behind you and want to subdue him for my own use. That's why I didn't kill you. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant that even my demonic eyes couldn't control you. Now, you've even destroyed 7 of my blood demon flowers. Now that you know my secret, how can I let you leave alive?" Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. He didn't expect Yan Zhuixing to know that he was related to Hero. But thinking about it, it made sense. Back in 100 Flowers Valley, he had used Hero to frame the father and son. Others might not know, but the person involved must know. It wasn't strange for him to guess that Hero was related to him. Don't brag too early. It's still uncertain who won't leave alive. However, I definitely won't die. Do you believe me? Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly. He had Utopia as his final trump card. Even if he couldn't defeat Yan Zhuixing, he was confident that he could escape. Therefore, he believed that he wouldn't die. Yan Zhuixing sneered in disdain. "Do you really think that you're the number 1 expert below the soul formation stage? You'll naturally believe me after I beat you up." Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly. Suddenly, he changed the topic and sighed. "On account of us being old friends, I'll tell you a piece of unfortunate news. Your father, Yin Bugue, really can't come back anymore. Because of your sins, he was killed on the Everlasting Island. What a terrible death. Not only was he dismembered into pieces, he was even thrown into the sea to feed the fishes. Brother Yin, you have to hold on." "Nonsense!" Yan Zhuixing roared fiercely. A faint murderous aura began to float out from his body. However, looking at his dazed expression, he seemed to have more or less believed it. Thinking about it, he was being hunted by various countries. How could his father, who was with them, have a good ending? Now's the time. Yu Qianqiu raised his brows. Hundreds of flying swords shot out while Yan Zhuixing was dazed. However, the 7 flying snakes that were protecting Yan Zhuixing seemed to have a mind of their own. Without Yan Zhuixing's control, they would automatically protect their master. It danced rapidly and bounced off the incoming flying swords with clanging sounds. Yan Zhuixing came back to his senses and said indifferently, "Is that all you've got? Burn your mother." Yu Qianqiu cursed. The flying swords that he shot out exploded. The surging black flames instantly engulfed Yan Zhuixing and the 7 flying snakes. However, there was no response from the inside. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed. Thinking back to the scene at the saber-drawing assembly, he cursed in his heart. This guy really isn't afraid of the black flames. Sure enough, Yan Zhuixing's disdainful snort came from the black flames, so that's how it is. It's the same as the broadsword, condensed from fire. It can be considered a mystical technique. It might work against others, but it's useless against me. In the surging black flames, a figure slowly walked out. There were 7 pairs of red lights circling around him. Yan Zhuixing calmly walked out of the flames. Coupled with the indifferent expression on his face, he looked like a demon that walked out of hell. Yan Zhuixing stood at the edge of the black flames. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and snorted. He slowly opened his arms and took a deep breath. The surging flames quickly rolled over and entered his nostrils and mouth like a whale sucking in water. The most terrifying thing was that his face was filled with a comfortable expression. The 7 flying snakes around him were also greedily sucking the black flames. The netherworld ghost flame actually became their tonic. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He couldn't let them take advantage of him. He stretched out his palm, and the surging sea of flames was quickly retracted into his sleeve. He could clearly feel that it had lessened a lot. Insignificant skill. Yan Zhuixing snorted in disdain and said indifferently, "Kill him." The 7 flying snakes shot out without hesitation. Yu Qianqiu naturally wouldn't just sit and wait for death. The flying sword around him immediately danced like a group of demons as they desperately blocked the 7 flying snakes. A series of clanging sounds rang out. The flying snakes weren't afraid of the flying swords that were burning with black flames at all. They shook their heads and wagged their tails as they charged forward with malevolent expressions. Their auras were ferocious and exceptionally valiant. The black flames' flying swords couldn't stop them. It was like scratching an itch on their bodies. It could only slow down their speed. Fuck. This is really troublesome. Yu Qianqiu suddenly had a feeling that he had nowhere to use his strength. These strange flying snakes couldn't be destroyed no matter how he slashed at them. They had a body full of skills, but he couldn't do anything to them. If he couldn't even deal with Yan Zhuixing's snakes, what was the point of fighting him? If he was forced to run away by a few snakes, then he would lose a lot of face. Just as he was thinking of a way to deal with them, the 7 flying snakes that were entangled by the flying swords suddenly sped up. They were like arrows that were released from a bow as they quickly launched a surprise attack. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and quickly dodged. Suddenly, he felt a tight grip on his wrist. There was a slippery feeling as if he was being strangled by a strong force. He couldn't dodge nimbly anymore. He quickly glanced around and was instantly shocked. He saw a flying snake had already wrapped around one of his arms. It opened its bloody mouth and was about to bite his hand. Right at this moment, his limbs tightened, and a huge pressure came from his waist and neck at the same time, almost suffocating him. Yu Qianqiu, today is the day you die. Yan Zhuixing's cold laughter echoed in the valley. Just at this moment, the valley suddenly shone with a dazzling green light. The entire valley was dyed in a bright green color. Hiss, hiss. A few shrill hisses echoed in the valley. At the critical moment, Yu Qianqiu, who was about to be bitten by the snakes, suddenly burst out with a ferocious green flame. The 7 flying snakes wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's body immediately emitted intense white smoke. They were shrinking at a visible speed. The flying snakes shook their heads and hissed in pain. They stopped entangling Yu Qianqiu and quickly retreated. In the blink of an eye, they were out of the sea of green flames. They had beside Yan Zhuixing. Their bodies were much weaker. They trembled and looked at the ball of green flames in fear. Someone in the azure flame let out a strange sound. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the azure flame, looked at himself in surprise. It seemed that even he didn't dare to believe what he was seeing. He had released the green flames out of instinct to protect himself. He had already made preparations to return to Utopia, but he didn't expect the green flames to have such a miraculous effect. Yu Qianqiu originally thought that even the powerful black fire couldn't deal with the snakes, and that he was already at his wit's end. Who knew that the green flames, which were much weaker than black fire, could restrain them? Indeed, everything has a nemesis. How strange. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the green flames, immediately burst out with a strange cackle. He looked no different from a devil or monster, and his laughter was abnormally insolent. The surrounding black flying swords all disappeared into the green flame with a whooshing sound. Then, A large number of green flying swords appeared and danced around the floating green flame. It was a breathtaking sight. Yan Juexing looked at the 7 flying snakes in astonishment and revealed a pained expression. Yu Qianzhou's fire made his heart feel like it was being cut by a knife. The flying snakes were connected to his cultivation. If the flying snakes were damaged, it was equivalent to his cultivation being damaged. How could not feel pained? Yan Juexing, hand over your life. Yu Qianzhou shouted wildly. Now that he had the upper hand, he didn't plan to let Yan Juexing off even though he was just about to escape. He waved his arms, and a sky full of green swords rained down. It was as if they wanted to turn the ground into a sieve. The 7 injured flying snakes rushed out to block and protect their master. However, their nemesis was their nemesis. The green flame's flying swords weren't as sharp as the black fire flying swords, but they were extremely sharp against them. There was almost no sound. With a whooshing sound, the 7 flying snakes were immediately cut into pieces, like eels being chopped up on a chopping board to be cooked. Yan Juexing was alarmed. He clapped his hands, and his body suddenly split into 3 like smoke, dodging the gaps of the green sword rain gently. 3 shadows that were as light as smoke swiftly devoured the snake fragments that were scattered in the air. Immediately after, they spun thousands of times in the rain of green swords, broke free from the net of swords, and charged straight at Yu Qianzhou. Chapter 695. Yu Qianzhou could not help but gasp. With such a dense rain of swords, even an expert at the end of the tribulation stage would lack the space to teleport. This fellow's body that had split into 3 was actually as soft as a flowing cloud. It could be long or short, flat or wide, and it could even twist like a fried dough twist, slipping through the narrow gaps of the net of swords. He had always thought that this was an illusion technique, but looking at the situation, it seemed that the 3 shadows were the real body. As expected of a demonic technique, it was really strange. Without much time to think, the green flames surged to protect his body. The flying swords that were shot out quickly turned around and shot back with Yu Qianzhou as the center. Yan Juexing originally wanted to forcefully break through the sea of green flames and take Yu Qianzhou's life. But when he got close, he immediately realized that the temperature of the flames was frighteningly high. Actually, the high temperature was secondary. He could use the domineering demonic technique to force his way through. But the scary thing was that when he got close to the green flames, the demonic aura in his body actually showed signs of not flowing smoothly. The speed of his movements and attacks slowed down a lot. Thinking of the scene where the 7 spiritual snakes were easily cut apart, Yan Juexing was shocked. The demonic technique that he was so proud of was actually restrained by the green flames. The closer he got, the slower the demonic aura in his body circulated. His speed slowed down, but the flying swords behind him sped up and shot back. The flying sword were shot out in a spread pattern, and they flashed back through the gaps. Now that they were shot back, it was conceivable that the gap in the middle was much narrower than when they were shot out. In addition, the speed had slowed down. Yan Juexing was almost scared out of his wits. Even if the spiritual snakes were cut apart, as long as the body was still there, he could reform it. But if his body of flesh and blood was cut into pieces, he would lose his life. In front of him was Yu Qianzhou's sinister smile. Even if he was furious and wanted to tear him into pieces, it was not as important as saving his own life. The faces of the 3 phantoms were almost indistinguishable. They quickly broke away from the sea of fire that was pressing towards them. Like drifting clouds and smoke, they made hundreds and thousands of turns and narrowly passed through the green sword net. Yu Qianzhou was amazed. This demonic technique was really too magical. It would be great if he had the chance to practice it. However, as soon as he recalled the tragic deaths of those girls, he immediately dispelled that thought. He didn't think that he was a good person, but as a man, no matter if he was despicable or shameless, good or bad, he had to have something in his heart that could support the heavens and the earth. There were things that he could do and things that he couldn't. Only then would he be worthy of being a man. As soon as the three wisps of green smoke left the sword net, they immediately combined into one on the way back. Yan Juexing's original body immediately appeared in the air. However, his current image was a little too horrible to look at. There was no trace of her hair crown, and nearly half of her long hair had been shaved off. Her clothes were tattered, and it was unknown how many cuts there were on her body. Fortunately, she was not injured. It could be seen how much of a risk he had taken to escape just now. He had practically brushed past the edge of death or serious injury to escape. This was all thanks to the miraculous demonic arts he had cultivated. The entire valley was dyed with green light. The stream reflected the green light like a green jade belt. Third brother Exion, who had his head above the water, was dumbfounded as he watched the two fight. This was a fight that he had never seen before. Both of them were using strange techniques. It couldn't be said that the winner had been decided yet, and he didn't know who would win and who would lose in the end. Yan Juexing, whose clothes were tattered and hair was disheveled, gnashed his teeth as he checked his body. He shouted angrily, "You Chincho, I won't forgive you. Use your brain before you speak. Look at yourself now. You're like a stray dog. Who is the one who won't forgive who?" Yu Qianqiu, who was in the sea of fire, suddenly said, "I almost forgot. You were originally a stray dog. In order to escape, you didn't even care about your mother and sister. Now, you don't even care about your old father. I think you'll have to hide for the rest of your life. You'll be a dog that can't return to its home for the rest of your life." These words made Yan Juexing tremble in anger. His eyes instantly turned blood red. His body faintly emitted a black light, and a majestic killing intent rose. His chest swelled up, and he suddenly spat a mouthful of blood on his palms. He clapped his palms and rubbed them together. In an instant, layers of red blood spread out from his palms. The faint red light enveloped a radius of nearly 10 meters. It was like a treasure light covering his entire body. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. He immediately became vigilant, and his flying swords formed a formation to protect himself. Yan Juexing's strange techniques were simply unimaginable. He couldn't help but be careful. "Ha!" Yan Juexing clapped his palms again and chanted in a deep voice, "Blood demon armor." The red light, within a radius of 10 meters, quickly shrank. In the blink of an eye, it was like a red armor covered his body. In addition to that pair of red eyes, he looked like a monster. It was terrifying to look at. The first to strike is the strongest, and the second to strike will suffer. This was the truth that Yu Qianqiu believed in when he was killing people. He waved his hands, and hundreds of flying swords shot out crazily. "Shoot the mother asterisk curve first." Demonic light glimpse. His voice echoed in the valley. Yan Juexing's body suddenly disappeared from the spot. Xiao, an unbelievably fast red light, directly collided with a rain of green swords shot out by Yu Qianqiu. The speed of the flying swords paled in comparison to the speed of the red light. It was like child's play. The speed was almost the same as teleportation. Pung pung. Rapid sounds of collision could be heard. A red light forcefully charged into the rain of swords, causing the green flying swords to be in a mess. In the blink of an eye, it broke through the rain of swords and arrived in front of Yu Qianqiu. The red light continued to charge into the sea of green flames. A fist was violently punched out. "Little devil fist." Yu Qianqiu vaguely heard these three words. The speed was too fast. The three words "little devil fist" and "demonic light glimpse" were almost superimposed together. The scene of Yan Juexing smashing the big black saber in cornucopia flashed in Yu Qianqiu's mind. He seemed to have heard the three words "little devil fist" at that time. If the big black saber couldn't do it, then he would use the big green saber. Although it was slow, it was actually fast. At the same time, when Yan Juexing forcefully broke through the rain of swords, Yu Qianqiu struggled to raise a huge, shining green saber. This saber was frighteningly huge. It was 4 to 5 meters long and more than 1 meter wide. "Hi!" The green light broke through the air and formed a green light screen, illuminating the entire valley. Yu Qianqiu held the saber with both hands and used all his strength to crazily slash at the red light. Bang! A loud sound reverberated in the valley. Countless scattered green light fragments were more dazzling than the stars in the sky, and shot in all directions like meteors. The tinkling sound of falling to the ground could be heard everywhere on the beach. The Dachshund saber was instantly shattered by a powerful force. Yuchincho looked up and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was shaken and flew backward rapidly. He felt that his internal organs had shifted and his stomach was in turmoil. His eyes were seeing stars and his ears were ringing nonstop. He didn't even know that he had been shaken and flew backward. He only felt dizzy and dizzy, as if the world was spinning, as if he was in a fog. The red figure that was rushing over also stopped for a moment. The red armor instantly collapsed. Yan Zhuixing, whose hair was disheveled, let out a muffled groan. His other hand was holding onto the fist that he had just punched out furiously. Bright red blood was dripping between his fingers. He pulled out the fist from his palm in disbelief. In fact, it could no longer be considered a complete fist because half of the fist had already been cut off to God knows where, and the broken bones inside were clearly visible. The blood demon's armor and a magic ray glimpse were demonic techniques that he had cultivated recently. He didn't expect that they would be broken by Yuchincho's saber the first time he used them. With Yuchincho's cultivation, it was impossible for him to break these two sets of demonic techniques. The key to the problem was undoubtedly that big green saber. He was now 100% sure that Yuchincho's green fire could restrain his demonic technique. He hated the fact that his demonic technique was still far from completion. Otherwise, how could a small green fire restrain it? However, that big green saber was also shattered by his own small demonic fist. Yan Zhuixing's gaze retracted from the green fragments around him and coldly stared at Yuchincho. The injury on his hand didn't seem to have much effect on him. Yuchincho, who was covered in green flames, fell onto a rock on the stream with a pah sound. It was the rock that he had been hiding on earlier. The green fire instantly retracted back into his body. Without anyone controlling the flying swords, they all fell to the ground one after another. Yuchincho struggled a few times, but he couldn't stand up, so he simply stopped moving. He sat on the rock, paralyzed to recover his energy. His arms were behind his back, supporting his upper body. Blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth, but he still laughed and said, "Brother Yin, how is the taste of this saber? Brother, did I go too hard?" Third Xian, who was hiding in the river, jumped out of the water with a hua sound. He could also see that Yuchincho was injured, so he wanted to take this opportunity to kill him. Yuchincho suddenly turned around and sneered, "Third Xian, if you're not afraid of death, come and try. No matter how badly injured I am, taking care of you is still a piece of cake. You back off. This is between me and him." Yan Zhuixing waved his broken palm and stopped Third Xian. He stared at Yuchincho and said in a deep voice, "I want to take his dog life with my own hands. Today, you won't be able to escape." "What a joke. You're just a stray dog?" Yuchincho sneered. "You're missing one part of your fist. Let's see how you're going to use the small demonic fist. There are many ways to kill you. Moreover, everyone has two fists." Yan Zhuixing slowly raised his other fist and shot down from above. He shouted angrily, "Small demonic fist." An intense wind from his fist swept over. Yuchincho sneered, and the stream behind him suddenly surged up violently. The stream was immediately cut off, and the exposed rocks below could be seen. The water from above came crashing down again. Two huge water dragons directly hit Yan Zhuixing, who was pouncing over. A lump of ice appeared in the air in an instant, wrapping Yan Zhuixing inside and falling straight down. Yuchincho quickly bounced off the stone and shot towards the lump of ice. But before the lump of ice landed on the ground, cracks appeared on it. With a bang, it exploded into countless pieces of ice, and a figure shot out. Actually, Yuchincho didn't expect the ice to trap him. This kind of ice couldn't even trap a core formation stage cultivator, let alone Yan Zhuixing. But what he wanted was this buffer time. He slapped Yan Zhuixing in the air and shouted angrily, "Absorbing Star's great technique. Chapter 696. When these four words rang in the valley, third Xian had the urge to run away. He looked at Yin Juexing, who broke out of the ice in horror, looking forward to his master's amazing skill to show its power again. However, Yin Juexing disappointed him in the end. He also saw the fierceness of the absorbing star's great skill again. Yu Qianqiu attacked with his palm. A cloud of white fog exploded from Yin Juexing's body, and the white fog drilled into the former's palm like a flowing cloud. Yin Juexing lost his momentum in an instant. His body instantly became thinner, and he slowly floated down, smashing into the ground with a thud. The valley instantly became quiet, as if everything was over. Finally, he got rid of this big trouble. Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief. He floated in the air and stared at the pile of bones below him, laughing. He clicked his tongue proudly and said, "My absorbing star's great skill is nothing special when I don't use it. Once I use it, it will never fail." Dongfang Bubi was considered powerful in the past. Once he used the absorbing star's great skill, he still lost. Hee. Amazing. Third Xian was completely dumbfounded. Even when he was awake, he did not know who Dongfang Bubi was. There was only one sentence that kept reverberating in his mind. "Master is dead." Huh? Yu Qianqiu, who was laughing and boasting himself, suddenly exclaimed in surprise. He seemed to have found something wrong. Logically speaking, a person who was hit by his absorbing star's great skill and had all the water his body sucked dry should be smashed to pieces when he fell from a height of more than 10 meters. However, Yin Juexing's dried corpse, although it was already like a skeleton, was still standing there. It looked a little strange. At this moment, a ball of black light suddenly appeared from Yin Juexing's body. It spread out and quickly protected his corpse. As the ball of black light emerged, Yu Qianqiu suddenly sensed a terrifying aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. It was desolate, ancient, and the entire valley seemed to have instantly traversed through space and returned to the distant past. The unknown aura was so terrifying that it made people suffocate. It was so thick and powerful that it was indescribable. He was clearly looking down from the sky, but it was as if he was looking up at a towering, majestic mountain. It made his heart surge with emotions, but also filled him with endless trembling. The instant the black light enveloped Yin Juexing's corpse, the surrounding ice cubes all clanked and bounced on the ground. Yu Qianqiu and third brother Xian looked around in fear. Suddenly, with a so-so sound, with Yin Juexing as the center, the surrounding crushed ice quickly gathered and wrapped around Yin Juexing in an instant. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. He saw an unbelievable scene. The corpse wrapped in ice was rapidly expanding, as if it was absorbing the water from the ice to replenish its body. Damn it! This was too monstrous. Could it be that this dog couldn't be killed? In a panic, Yu Qianqiu clenched his teeth, and a trace of ruthlessness flashed across his face. He spread his arms, and all the green fragments and flying swords in the valley returned to his body. He clasped his hands together, and the green light once again illuminated the valley. A huge green saber that was 4 to 5 meters long appeared in his hand. Yin Juexing, I don't care if you're a human, a demon, or a demon. I don't believe in evil. I'll chop you into minced meat. Let's see how you're going to survive. Yu Qianqiu shouted. With a hoo sound, a green light flashed across the sky, and a crazy saber shadow slashed toward the figure in the ice cubes. Bang! The ice cubes suddenly exploded, and a figure emerged from the ice cubes. Immediately, he let out a shrill scream. Yin Juexing did resurrect, but unfortunately, he ran into Yu Qianqiu, who believed in eliminating the root of the problem. The moment he broke out of the ice cubes, he ran into the saber. He didn't even have time to dodge. His body quickly dodged, but he was still hit by the saber. Blood splattered, and the saber directly cut down from his shoulder. His entire arm was separated from his body, and his arm was sent flying on the spot. When Yu Qianqiu became ruthless, he was definitely a ruthless character. There was no such thing as mercy. What he wanted was Yin Juexing's life. How could an arm satisfy his desire? He shouted with a ferocious face. Give me your life. The saber followed Yan Juexing's dodging body and chased after him. Yan Juexing, who had already lost a lot of vitality, desperately waved a little devil fist with his other hand and smashed it on the broad saber. With a loud dang sound, the saber was immediately shaken off. However, it seemed that he had the will, but not the strength. He, who had lost a lot of vitality, had no strength to shatter the great green saber. He could only shake it off. Taking advantage of this gap, he quickly dodged and drew an arc downwards. When he was close to the ground, he grabbed the arm that was separated from his body. Yu Qianqiu's arm shook, and he realized that the power of Yan Juexing's little devil fist was far from what he had imagined. He immediately understood that this kid was too heavily injured and didn't have much lethality. In other words, now was the best time to kill him. He must not miss this opportunity. The terrifyingly large great green saber quickly slashed again. Yan Juexing, who was pale, stepped on the ground and used the momentum to retreat. The great green saber brushed past him, and he barely escaped this attack. Bang! The ground was slashed by the saber, and the gravel flew everywhere. Yu Qianqiu missed his attack, so he pushed the saber and quickly chased after Yan Juexing. He stabbed wildly at Yan Juexing, who was flying backward. The scene of him slashing madly made people speechless. Yan Juexing, who was exhausted, was immediately scared out of his wits. His pale face became even paler. Yan Juexing, who was dancing on the blade, immediately understood that Yu Qianqiu was now full of vigor, and he didn't have the strength to fight with Yu Qianqiu in his current physical condition. If he continued to waste time, he would only die. He immediately shouted, "Third brother Xian, go to Lingfeng Valley quickly and steal your master's 10 pots of blood orchids at all costs." Hurry! Third brother Xian immediately flew away without hesitation, and the direction was Lingfeng Valley. 10 pots of blood orchids? Even if I give you 10,000 pots of blood orchids, you won't have the chance to use them again. Today, I must chop you into minced meat and feed you to the dogs. I'll see how you can resurrect. Still want to run? Stop right there. Just give me a few slashes, and I'll give you a quick death. Now you know that I'm the #1 master below the spirit-severing stage. Mother asterisk her. Don't run. Yu Qianqiu kept scolding, and his hands didn't slow down either, slashing wildly. He wouldn't stop until he killed you. Yan Juexing, whose hair was disheveled and clothes were ragged, had a pale face. At this time, there was a morbid flush on his face. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and almost spewed fire. Under such a crushing defeat, he still had to suffer insults while fleeing in a hurry. No one could stand it. As long as one had a little bit of courage, it would be strange if he didn't fight desperately. At this time, Yan Juexing almost lost his mind after being scolded by Yu Qianqiu. He really wanted to rush forward and fight. Even if he could bite Yu Qianqiu, he would be willing to die. However, a trace of reason told him that he couldn't be impulsive. If he was impulsive at this time, he might not even have the chance to take revenge. Yan Juexing, who was fleeing in a hurry, stared at the broken arm in his hand. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. He originally wanted to use demonic arts to reattach the broken arm, but now it seemed that saving his life was the top priority. Escape. Yan Juexing, who was in the saber light, suddenly grabbed the broken arm and squeezed it. With a bang, the entire broken arm instantly exploded into pieces. In an instant, a large amount of blood mist appeared, making it impossible to see anything clearly. Not to mention Yan Juexing's strange behavior. When Yu Qianqiu heard that escape, he immediately felt that something was wrong. The cyan saber shadow immediately danced wildly in the blood mist. He roared angrily, "Yan Juexing, don't run if you have the guts. Whoever runs is a beast." The expanding blood mist suddenly collapsed and shrank rapidly, forming a blood scab that fell to the ground. The valley was restored to its original state. Yu Qianqiu, who was dancing wildly with the saber, stopped and saw that the surroundings were empty. There was no trace of Yan Juexing. He didn't even know where Yin Juexing escaped from. There was no sound of anyone leaving at all. Yin Juexing seemed to have suddenly disappeared. He didn't know that if Yin Juexing still had the strength when he was in the cornucopia, he would probably have died in the hands of Yu Qianqiu. However, during this time, Yin Juexing, who had used the 7-star blood orchid to successfully break through to the middle stage of crossing calamity, practiced a few demonic arts that he could barely dabble in and save his life at the critical moment. However, there was a special reason why he was magically resurrected after being hit by Yu Qianqiu's absorbing star's great technique. Perhaps even Yin Juexing himself didn't know how he came back to life again. What he used to escape just now was the blood escape from a demonic book, which was one of the demonic arts that he had just practiced. Normally, it would be very difficult to cultivate until the end of the tribulation, but because of his current difficult situation, he forced himself to cultivate and almost suffered the backlash of the demonic art. During the process, he endured unimaginable pain, but he stubbornly gritted his teeth and endured it. Practicing the blood escape was originally used to guard against masters in the soul formation stage, but who knew that he would be forced to use it for the first time by Yu Qianqiu. The use of this demonic art consumed a lot of devil aura, and it also used a lot of one's own blood essence as a primer. It was an escape method that was used as a last resort, and generally wouldn't be used easily. Demonic cultivators with high cultivation could use the blood escape to save their lives, and they could escape thousands of miles in an instant. The higher their cultivation, the farther they could escape, and it was very effective in saving their lives at the critical moment. However, with Yin Juexing's current cultivation and physical state, he couldn't escape far at all. The blood escape just now only escaped for about 10 miles. At this time, Yin Juexing was hiding in a desolate ravine, and even he didn't know where he was. His face was as yellow as gold paper, and his whole body was curled up on the ground. His whole body was trembling in pain, and beads of sweat the size of soybeans appeared on his forehead. He endured the pain and told himself that he must not faint. Once he fainted, the smell of blood on his body would definitely attract the ferocious beasts in the deep mountains. There is no lack of ferocious beasts in the deep mountains. If he didn't die in the hands of Yu Qianqiu, but died in the hands of beasts, it would be too unjust. He held his shoulder that had lost an arm with one hand and tried to sit up to recover. He gritted his teeth a few times, but he couldn't sit up. His body was too weak. In the end, he bit his lips so hard that blood came out and the veins on his neck bulged. Ugh! He raised his head and let out a painful groan and finally sat up. After panting a few times, he sat cross-legged with difficulty and quickly treated the wound on his shoulder. He stopped the blood flow and slowly entered a state of recovery. Chapter 697. In the empty valley, Yu Qianqiu flew quickly and searched the dense forest on 3 sides. However, even after searching several times with his eyes and divine sense, he could not find any trace of Yin Juexing. Thinking of Yin Juexing's escape before he escaped, Yu Qianqiu flew up into the sky and looked around at the boundless mountains. It was easier said than done to find a person who was intentionally hiding in these boundless mountains. He could not help but feel a sense of powerlessness in his heart. He was afraid that the guy had really escaped. Not good, Yu Qianqiu suddenly exclaimed. He remembered that Yin Juexing told 3rd Xian to steal 10 pots of 7-star blood orchid from Lu Yanqing. Didn't he give 10 pots of 7-star blood orchid to Lu Yanqing? If those 10 pots of blood orchid fell into Yin Juexing's hands, the consequences would be unimaginable. 3rd Xian's figure had long disappeared from the valley. Yu Qianqiu did not hesitate to fly quickly in the direction of Lingfang Valley. He increased his flying speed to the limit that his cultivation could control. He flew through the sky anxiously. In an instant, a figure went far away. The valley was a mess, the ground was a mess, and there were potholes everywhere. After a night of torment, the sky was already bright. There was a red light in the east, and the sunrise was imminent. The vast mountains retreated quickly below. Yu Qianshou, who was flying at high speed, suddenly frowned and slowed down. With his speed, he definitely could not catch up with third Exine, but this was not the most important thing. The key was that Lu Yanqing and Yin Zhuixing were basically a snake and a rat. There should be 2 spirit-severing experts in Lingfang Valley. He had killed 3 of Lu Yanqing's disciples. Wasn't it courting death to rush there now? With his current cultivation, he was not a match for a spirit-severing expert. Bitch, don't fall into my hands. Yu Qianshou hit his fist heavily in the air. His face was full of regret. He regretted that he fell for that bitch's trick and gave her 10 pots of 7-star blood orchid. The most terrible thing was that he actually gave 100 charms in Yin Yu to her. Wasn't this asking for death? Now, he had no choice but to go to the Spirit Fang Valley. Not for anything else, but just to save the temptress in Yin Yu. He had no choice but to go there. However, charging in alone was not a solution. He had to find 2 experts to help him. No matter how he thought about it, he really didn't know who to ask for help. Baiwan Nation was close to this place, and when Lanfeng's cultivation was strong enough. But the key was that this guy had lost his soul to Lu Yanqing. It would be good if he didn't help, and he might even be in cahoots with her. It was bamboo making. He also had a good relationship with Lu Yanqing. He couldn't bring himself to ask his master to save his woman. If only Baikong was still alive. After thinking about a lot of people, he still felt that they were not suitable. In the end, he thought about Pei Fong, Qi Jiujuan, and Ouyangda. In any case, those 3 fellows were rushing to flatter Hibiscus. He was prepared to use Hibiscus's name to invite these 3 monstrous experts. Otherwise, if an ordinary person heard that they were going to deal with Lu Yanqing, they would definitely be scared away by Wen Lanfeng. Yu Qianshou was about to go to the Blue Palace when he suddenly became startled. His eyes flashed, and he muttered to himself. Yin Zhuixing asked third Exen to steal the 7-star blood orchid. Steal the 7-star blood orchid. Why? Aren't they in cahoots? Not good. Third Exin and the others might have been controlled by Yin Zhuixing's devil eye. He reacted in a flash, but third Exin had already left for a while, and he was afraid that he would soon reach Lingfang Valley. At present, stopping third Exin from stealing the blood orchid was the top priority. He suddenly became anxious and flew in the direction of Lingfang Valley. Not long after, he suddenly slapped himself in the face and scolded, "Why am I so stupid?" He suddenly disappeared in the air. When he reappeared, he was already in the call where he first came to Lingfang Valley last night. But just as he appeared, a figure flew over his head with a whoosh. Yu Qianshou looked up and saw that it was Xian Lao-san. Who else could it be? He didn't expect that Xian Lao-san had arrived. He immediately jumped into the air and chased after him, shouting angrily, "Third Xian, don't run. Stop right there." Third Xian looked back and was immediately shocked. He had already flown with all his might, but he didn't expect Yu Qianshou to still chase after him. Without saying anything, he shot toward the peak of Lingfang Valley's medicine hut. As soon as third Xian landed on the platform, he immediately rushed to the stone slab on the right side where the spirit herbs were placed. The 10 pots of blood orchids on the stone slab were all put into his storage bag. At this moment, someone suddenly shouted, "Who is the one pretending to be his father here?" A figure swept into the air from Medicine Hut Mountain. He was tall and thin, and he stared angrily at Yu Qianshou, who was flying over. This person was none other than 9th Xian of the Xian family, an early divine transformation cultivator of Lingfang Valley. There was no difference between Yu Qianshou pretending to be third Xian's father and him pretending to be his father. Naturally, he was very unhappy. Third Xian, who was about to escape, suddenly had his eyes lit up. He cried out in pain, "Ninth brother, this person killed 5th brother, 6th brother, and 7th brother. He also stole Master's 10 pots of blood orchids. Quickly kill him." What? 9th Xian, who was in the air, was shocked. When he looked back at third Xian, he saw that the 10 pots of blood orchids on the stone slab next to him were indeed gone. Third Xian was his brother, so he naturally believed what he said. As for the 7-star blood orchids being stolen by third Xian, he would not even think about it. Third Xian, Your mother's bullshit. Yu Qianqiu cursed. Suddenly, he saw a third Exine sprang up and directly swept toward the dense forest behind the mountain. He immediately waved his hand and shouted from afar, You, stop him, don't let him escape. Ninth Exine's face suddenly darkened. Isn't third Exine's mother his mother? He teleported in front of Yu Qianqiu, who was chasing third Exine. He waved his palm, and a strong wave of qi blocked Yu Qianqiu. If Lu Yanqing didn't hate fighting and killing, he would have already made his move. Damn it! If you don't want to chase, then get out of my way. Don't block me, Yu Qianqiu said in exasperation. Unfortunately, he changed his position several times, but he was forced to not move an inch by Ninth Exine's palm. Little did he know that this was the consequence of his foul mouth. Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was not enough to catch up with third Exine. Now that he was blocked, he could only watch helplessly as third Exine disappeared into the distant mountains. He immediately flew into a rage and pointed at Ninth Exine, shouting, Who are you? Do you know that you are in big trouble? I am Lingfang Valley's Ninth Exine. Ninth Exine stared at Yu Qianqiu with murderous eyes and asked in a deep voice, My third brother said that you killed my fifth brother, sixth brother, and seventh brother. You also stole our sect's spiritual herb, the 7-star blood orchid. Is that true? Yu Qianqiu was startled. Only then did he remember that third Exine had called him ninth brother. It seemed that this person in front of him was another spirit-severing expert from Lingfang Valley. In the small courtyard, Lu Yanqing heard the commotion outside early in the morning. But because of her appearance, she never came out to see strange men. But when she heard third Exine say that fifth brother, sixth brother, and seventh brother were killed, she could no longer sit still. Her pretty face was frosty, and she slowly walked out of the house. But when she saw the person in the air who was confronting Ninth Exine, she immediately said, Yu Qianqiu, why is it you? After Ninth Exine heard his master's words, he was also startled. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and looked him up and down. Then he said in astonishment, You are Yu Qianqiu? He was now a little suspicious of his third brother's words. With his master's eyesight, he certainly wouldn't recognize the wrong person. Since this person was Yu Qianqiu, and the master's 7-star blood orchid was originally gifted by him, why would he steal it back? Besides, third brother often talked about how good Yu Qianqiu was. Could it be a joke? In addition to third Exine's wild temperament, Ninth Exine immediately confirmed his own guess. The haze on his face immediately disappeared. He cursed in his heart. Third brother is too willful. How can he make such a joke? I am Yu Qianqiu. After Yu Qianqiu replied, his gaze fell on the woman on the mountain plain. She was wearing a green robe and looked familiar. That simple yet dazzling appearance made everything around her pale in comparison. He was afraid that in this world, there wouldn't be a second person as beautiful as her. She was more beautiful than the women he had seen in his 2 lifetimes. His heart immediately warmed, but at this time he was burning with anxiety. In addition, his impression of Lu Yanqing wasn't very good. How could he be in a mood to look at a beauty? After his eyes slightly brightened, he asked with some doubt, You are Senior Lu of Spiritfang Valley? Ninth Exine secretly nodded his head in appreciation. The men who came to see his master, except for the terrifying old man from the demon ghost domain, were all stunned for a long time. But this Yu Qianqiu only revealed a trace of appreciation. He didn't lose his composure at all. He thought in his heart, someone who could be praised by third brother is indeed not someone ordinary people can compare to. Lu Yanqing was also somewhat surprised. This Yu Qianqiu was the second man who saw her true appearance and remained indifferent. Bai Changchun's taste in picking disciples was indeed not something ordinary people could compare to. Suddenly, as if he had found the long-lost feeling of being a normal person, he calmly nodded his head and said, It's me. Yu Qianqiu, why are you chasing after my third brother? No wonder the voice sounded familiar. It turned out to be Senior Lu. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Looking at the direction third brother Exine disappeared in, he knew that he couldn't catch up. It seemed that he still needed the help of the people of Spiritfang Valley. He immediately floated to the platform and cupped his hands in salute. Greetings, Senior Liu. Senior Liu, please quickly send out all the people of Spirit Fong Valley to capture third brother Xian. We must not let him escape with the 7-star blood orchid. Otherwise, something big will happen. Ninth Xian flashed down and said strangely, Yu Qianqiu, what did you say? You said that my third brother took away the 7-star blood orchid? At this time, it was face to face. After seeing Lu Yanqing's stunning appearance at a close distance, Yu Qianqiu exclaimed, Senior Liu is worthy of being the world's first beauty. You really can't be compared to ordinary people. It was just a casual compliment. Lu Yanqing just wanted to say a few perfunctory words, but she saw Yu Qianqiu turn his head and roll his eyes at Ninth Xian. Can I still lie? Just before you blocked me, I saw him take away the 10 pots of blood orchid with my own eyes. I asked you to chase after him, but you blocked me instead. What should I say to you? Lu Yanqing's expression slightly stiffened. She swallowed the words that reached her mouth. She was really speechless. It was the first time that a man saw his true appearance and ignored her. Seeing him praise her appearance, she wanted to say a few perfunctory words. Who knew that the other party's attention was not on her at all, so she did not have the chance to be perfunctory. It seemed that he was praising her perfunctorily, as if he did not put her appearance in his eyes at all. Chapter 698. Impossible. Old Ninth Xian firmly denied. My third brother would never steal master's things. Who would have thought that Lu Yanqing would sigh softly? It was Lao San who took away the 10 pots of blood orchid. Xian Laojiu was in the belly of the mountain before. Perhaps he did not notice. But Lu Yanqing was in the small manor, and as soon as Xian Laosan flew near, she noticed. Xian Laosan took away 10 pots of blood orchid. Lu Yanqing felt strange. Although she didn't know the reason, she didn't believe that Xian Laosan would do anything against her, so she didn't come out to stop him. Why didn't you stop him when you knew he took the blood orchid? Yu Qianqiu stared at Lu Yanqing and shouted. Xian Laojiu was startled at first. Then he frowned and said, Yu Qianqiu, watch your tone. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He couldn't wait to rush up and give Lu Yanqing 2 slaps. At this time, no matter how beautiful Lu Yanqing was, she became a pile of dog shit in his eyes. However, he knew that he was no match for the two of them. So he suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, Senior Liu, something big is going to happen. Lu Yanqing stared at Yu Qianqiu with clear eyes, and there was a trace of doubt in her heart. She seemed to see a trace of disgust in Yu Qianqiu's eyes. She had never seen a man show such a look to her, and did not know when she had offended him. She frowned and said, Yu Qianqiu, what exactly happened between you and third brother? With a gloomy face, Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and said, Yin Juixing is hiding in your Ling Fong Valley. You probably don't know about it yet, do you? Lu Yanqing and Xian Laojiu looked at each other in surprise. The former said strangely, This is not possible. How do you know that Yin Juixing is hiding in my Spirit Fong Valley? Although the two of them were surprised, they didn't seem to be disgusted by the fact that Yin Juixing was hiding in the Spirit Fong Valley. To the two of them, Yin Juixing had no enmity with them and was not involved in anything. So what if he was hiding in the Spirit Fong Valley? Looks like you guys don't care. Good. That's great. Very good. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the two of them and laughed angrily, wishing that he could engrave the word 38 on Lu Yanqing's seemingly beautiful face. Sometimes, beautiful things could be so hateful and unsightly, making people feel even worse. Xian Laojiu's face darkened as he shouted, Impudent. Lu Yanqing raised her arm and stopped him from continuing. She said calmly, Yu Qianqiu, if you have anything to say, you can say it. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath, calmed his emotions, and said slowly, Yin Juixing is hiding in your Ling Fong Valley to cultivate his demonic arts. His cultivation process is abnormally cruel, and he has sacrificed countless mortal girls' lives. Previously, I accidentally bumped into him and had a huge battle with him. He was severely injured by me and escaped. The 7-star blood orchid is the key to his cultivation of demonic arts. 4 of your disciples have been controlled by his demonic eyes and have become his puppet accomplices. Third brother Xian is one of them. What do you think he wants to do by stealing those 10 pots of blood orchid? What? Lu Yanqing and Xian Laojiu exclaimed at the same time. This time, the two of them could no longer calm down and were even a little flustered. Yu Qianqiu still felt that the stimulation was not enough and said with a sneer, I forgot to tell Senior Lu, of your 4 disciples, other than third brother Xian, 3 have already been killed by Yan Juexing. If you don't want third brother Xian to die, I advise you to quickly send people to search the entire Lingfang Valley. He has already been seriously injured by me, and I don't think he can escape too far for the time being. What? The two of them exclaimed again. Xian Laojiu lost his composure and said with a trembling voice, You said that Yan Juexing killed my 3 brothers? Yu Qianqiu naturally wouldn't admit that he was the one who killed them. He coldly said, I don't know if they were your elder brothers or not. I only heard third Xian call them 5th brother, 6th brother, and 7th brother. Whether they were your elder brothers or not, it's up to you. Xian Laojiu suddenly turned around and anxiously bowed to Lu Yanqing and begged, Master, whether it is true or not, please allow me to bring people to search. Bring all the people in the sect that can be used, and be sure to rescue third brother. Lu Yanqing said with a worried face. Yes. Xian Laojiu cupped his hands and quickly left. After a while, hundreds of people flew out of Medicine Hut Mountain and swept into the mountains. Yu Qianqiu withdrew his gaze from the crowd and stared at Lu Yanqing and said with a sneer, Senior Lu, don't you think that with the people of your Lingfang Valley, the hope of finding them in the vast mountains is very slim? I think it's better to find more people. The worried Lu Yanqing immediately came back to her senses and nodded in a panic. I will contact Wen Lanfeng and ask him to send people. For someone like her who had almost never suffered any disasters, although she had experienced a long time, her ability to cope with sudden changes was really not good. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Although he heard that this woman had been rejecting Wen Lanfeng, it seemed that when she was in trouble, the first thing she thought of was Wen Lanfeng. However, Yu Qianqiu still felt that this was not safe. He was afraid that they would not be able to catch Yan Juexing if there were less people. So he immediately reminded her again, last time, so many people failed to catch Yan Juexing, and Wen Lanfeng's family is also difficult to deal with. I heard that Senior Lu has a wide range of contacts. For the safety of third brother Xian, it's better to invite people who can help. Lu Yanqing did not think too much, and nodded repeatedly, quickly flashed into the small courtyard, and used the communication array to invite people everywhere. Yu Qianqiu. Just as Yu Qianqiu looked down the mountain, he suddenly heard someone calling him. Looking at the sound, he saw Enchantress of Charm and Yin Yu looking at him at the entrance of the courtyard. The two had actually been inside, and as soon as Yu Qianqiu arrived, they knew it was him. However, seeing Lu Yanqing and Xian Laojiu, 2 experts of soul formation stage, they did not dare to come over and disturb him. At this time, seeing that the 2 experts of soul formation stage had left, they appeared and slowly walked over. Seeing that the 2 women were safe and sound, Yu Qianqiu's mood suddenly improved a lot. In particular, the plain clothes that the 2 women had changed into, although it covered their graceful bodies, it added a bit of a different kind of charm to them. Seeing this, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and immediately said with a smile, Are you 2 used to living here? The 2 women nodded, indicating that they were fine. Yin Yu stared at him, a little hesitant to speak. Yu Qianqiu felt a little itchy in his heart, but he deliberately avoided her gaze, all because he did not know what to say. Is that Yan Juexing really that dangerous? Enchantress of Charm asked in a rare solemn tone. Obviously, she also heard the conversation between Yu Qianqiu and Lu Yanqing. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank, his eyes swept across the two's face, and slowly asked, Have you seen Yan Juexing in Lingfang Valley? The 2 shook their heads, and Enchantress of Charm replied, Other than walking around once when we first arrived, we have been following Senior Lu's side recently, and learned a lot of things. As for Yan Juexing, we have never seen him. But just now, when I heard you mention third brother Xian, I remembered something. Some time ago, He often said that he would bring us to the back mountain to have a look, but because we are women, it is not convenient for us to go with him to that remote place, so we refused. Now that I think about it, this matter is a little suspicious. Yu Qinshou nodded and immediately let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that his worry was right. Yin Juexing really wanted to make a move on the two women through third brother Xin. Fortunately, the two of them had always been by Lu Yanqing's side and did not give Yin Juexing a chance to make a move. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although that guy was seriously injured by me and escaped, there are some things that need to be prepared in advance. Yu Qinshou solemnly reminded, if you meet him, do not hold any hope and immediately run as far as you can, especially when his eyes are glowing red. Immediately avoid them. Do not look at them, or your mind will be controlled by him, and you will become his puppet. The two women's faces changed, and they looked at each other with goosebumps. Enchantress of Charm asked again, is Yin Juexing really that scary? That guy's devil art is very strange. I reckon that no cultivator below the soul-forming stage can be his opponent. Last night, he met me, so it was his bad luck. Yu Qinshou reminded the two again. Do not hold any hope. You did not see it with your own eyes, so you can't imagine how terrifying his devil art is. He was even able to come back to life and escape after being killed by me once. In short, you are definitely not his opponent. Third brother Xin and his senior brothers are all experts at the end of the tribulation passing stage, so you must learn from them. They can come back to life after dying? The two women were shocked by his words and immediately paid attention to it and immediately agreed. The three of them then stood at the edge of the flat platform, facing the rising sun as they chatted idly. The mountain path in the distance was shrouded by the rising mist, and they could vaguely see many people heading towards the Spirit Fong Valley. After Yu Qinshou noticed, he stretched out his hand and pointed and asked curiously, what are those people doing? Enchantress of Charm giggled and explained, they're the poor people of the nearby countries. Because Spirit Fong Valley can treat people for free, they all come to seek medical advice. Yu Qinshou slightly frowned. At this time, Lu Yanqing walked out of the manor, and Enchantress of Charm and Yinyu immediately bowed and greeted Senior Lu. However, Yu Qinshou pointed to the mountain path in the distance and said to Lu Yanqing, Senior Lu, shouldn't you stop practicing medicine for a while? I'm afraid that the commotion here will shock the world. Okay, Lu Yanqing said in a daze. Only then did she realize that there was no one to command her, and they had all gone into the mountains to find someone. After Yu Qinshou glanced at them, he raised his eyebrows, turned to Enchantress of Charm and Yinyu, and said, persuade the people who came to go back, and if you can't persuade them to go back, then directly show your skills and rush back. Think of a way to seal the mountain path and set up a monument. Spirit Fong Valley has something important to do, and the valley will be sealed for a month. He did not need Lu Yanqing's consent and directly helped her make the decision. Hearing this, the two women were speechless, thinking that this guy was too bold and could not help but look at Lu Yanqing. Lu Yanqing looked at Yu Qinshou, and seeing that he was so determined, she nodded. Only then did the two women quickly fly away. There were only two people left on a mountain plateau, and Yu Qinshou indifferently stared at the woman beside him and asked, Senior Lu, how is the helper you found? Although he called her senior, there was no respect that should be given to a senior. Lu Yanqing was not in the mood to pay attention to this at this time, and her bright eyes swept over the empty Spirit Fong Valley. Her heart became more anxious, and she sighed softly. When Lanfeng has already brought people here, as for the others, I'm afraid they won't come for the time being. Yu Qinshou was stunned and felt that something was wrong. Could it be that those greedy people did not want to rob Yin Juexing of the peerless cultivation method? He said in surprise. Could it be that something big happened in the cultivation world again? Lu Yanqing looked at him curiously, and her black eyebrows slightly furrowed. The opening of the East Holy Land is in the near future, and no one can be sure of the specific day. Maybe it will be a few days earlier, maybe it will be a few days later. Anyway, it will definitely be within this month. At this time, no one wants to make any big movements for fear of causing trouble for themselves, and many people have already rushed to the East Sea in advance, preparing to respectfully send by Changchun to the East Holy Land. Chapter 699. Oh, Yu Qianqiu was stunned on the spot. How could he forget such a big thing? For a long time, he had been worrying about a lot of things, but there was one place that he didn't need to worry about. That was naturally the demon ghost domains by Changchun. The old guy was so awesome that he didn't need to worry about him at all. Because he was used to not having to do anything, he really forgot. However, he had some doubts in his heart. The old guy was going to leave. Why didn't he tell me? It shouldn't be. The two of them stopped talking. Lu Yanqing quietly looked at the unpredictable expression on his face. Suddenly, she remembered the scene of this guy pointing fingers at her. He was really impolite, not giving her any face at all, and she didn't know what happened to her, but she listened to him in a daze. A trace of anger flashed across Lu Yanqing's face. Then, she looked at Yu Qianqiu. She was angry, but she was also curious. This guy clearly had the biggest backing in the world, but he never revealed it. Otherwise, who in the cultivation world would dare to provoke him? How could he be chased everywhere? These two master and disciple were both strange people. Two figures flew back. The return of the 100-charm beauty, and Yin Yu made the two of them come back to their senses. The 100-charm beauty looked at the two of them suspiciously. She seemed to have seen Lu Yanqing staring at Yu Qianqiu. This was nothing, but when she saw her and Yin Yu return, she looked away in a panic, giving people a feeling of guilt. Why did it feel a little ambiguous? Is everything done? Yu Qianqiu looked at the two women and asked. The 100-charm beauty smiled and said, yes. Yu Qianqiu paused, then suddenly cupped his hands towards Lu Yanqing and said, Senior Lu, I have something to do first. I will leave the two of them to you. Lu Yanqing nodded slightly. In her heart, she had already guessed where he was going. Yu Qianqiu then said to the two women, Here, you'd better not run around. It's safer to follow Senior Lu. After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave, but then he seemed to think of something. He looked at the alluring temptress and said, I have avenged Master Hao. You can rest assured. The 100-charm enchantress expression darkened, and she said softly, I've heard it from Senior Lu. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Lu Yanqing, then cupped his hands towards the few of them and said, Goodbye. By the time when Lanfeng arrived at the Spirit Fong Valley with thousands of people, Yu Qianqiu had already appeared in the ghostly domain. Although he could directly teleport to Obedient Island, he still pretended to fly towards it. The reason he came here was to find out when his master would leave so that he could make the necessary preparations. Leaping over the surface of the lake, he could already see the Obedient Island in the distance. As he neared, he suddenly saw a purple shadow shooting towards him. Yu Qianqiu didn't even need to guess to know who it was. Big liar. He chuckled and flashed to his side. She turned her head and asked, Why are you back? Yu Qianqiu was not interested in the way she addressed him. His face darkened, and he rolled his dead fish eyes. With a voice that could not be any lighter, he said disdainfully, It's none of your business. The reason why he lowered his voice was because he was worried about Nongzhu, who loved her daughter as much as her life. Zi immediately stopped smiling, and her pretty face turned cold. But Yu Qianqiu had already landed on the Obedient Island, standing face to face with Hibiscus, who was looking forward to seeing him. Miss Mu bowed to him. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to be so polite. He smiled at Hibiscus and said, I will go and greet Master first. Let's talk later. Okay. Hibiscus obediently replied and watched him walk towards the big house. He pulled her arm and said coldly, Hibiscus, ignore him. Hibiscus nodded with a smile like a flower. As soon as Yu Qianqiu walked into the big house, he saw Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the center with his eyes closed. Nongzhu was sitting on the right side of Bai Changchun. She stretched and yawned. Boy, you are back. I was on to look for you on behalf of your master. Master, Senior Nongzhu. Yu Qianqiu bowed and sat on the left side of Bai Changchun, which was opposite to Nongzhu. They stared at each other, waiting for Bai Changchun to speak. No one knew what Bai Changchun was thinking. The house was quiet. After a long time, Bai Changchun opened his eyes. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and asked, "What is it that you came back for?" Yu Qianqiu was in awe, but he pretended to be generous and said, "This time, I came back because I have something to ask, Master." He always remembered what Bai Changchun said after he killed He Li. Bai Changchun's evaluation of He Li was too polite. He remembered it when he saw Bai Changchun. Therefore, although he seemed to be respectful, he did not dare to be too polite. Before Bai Changchun opened his mouth, Nongzhu asked, "What is it? Tell me about it." With a curious look on his face, he felt a little bored. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Bai Changchun. Seeing that the old man had no objection, he looked at Nongzhu and asked, "Senior Nongzhu, do you remember Yan Zhuixing?" "Him." Nongzhu smiled disapprovingly and said, "He is your sworn enemy. Both of you went from the cultivation world of Huaxia to the cornucopia. If you didn't make him famous, I wouldn't care who he is." Tilting his head to look at Bai Changchun, he explained, "He's the new disciple of Bing Qingzi. I've told you about him before. He's the one who was forced by your disciple to hide all day long. How pitiful." He then turned his head to ask Yu Qianqiu, "What's wrong? Are you fighting against each other again? Hasn't he been defeated by you all the time? Can't you defeat him? You even asked your master. You think too highly of him, don't you? What a joke. Who does he think he is? Why can't I defeat him?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said disdainfully, "I happened to meet him before I came here. I seriously injured him and chopped off one of his arms. Unfortunately, he escaped." "You are so useless. You seriously injured him and chopped off one of his arms, but you let him escape?" Nongzhu sat up straight and asked excitedly, "It can't be so simple. What's going on? Tell me." Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "I only know what devil art that fellow cultivates, and it's incomparably strange. Actually, before I injured him this time, I'd already killed him once. But the shocking thing is that he was actually able to come back to life after being turned into a dried corpse, and in the end, he escaped. Master, have you ever heard of such an evil skill? Come back to life?" Nongzhu was shocked and looked at Bai Changchun inquiringly. Bai Changchun was also a little surprised. He thought for a while and said slowly, "It's said that there is a skill that can bring people back to life after death. But I don't know what it is. But I don't believe that someone with a shallow cultivation who can defeat you can cultivate to the realm of resurrection. That realm is close to the divine sense. I'm afraid that even the masters in the immortal realm can't do that. It's really incredible." Nongzhu poked her head and asked weakly, "Old Bai, why don't you catch that guy and kill him again, so that you can't confirm it again? I can also see what kind of resurrection skill it is." Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and thought that it was a good idea. Bai Changchun glanced at them fiercely. They shrunk their heads and quickly extinguished their evil thoughts. They all knew that Bai Changchun was arrogant. As long as no one provoked him, he would not fight with such a junior. Unless Yan Zhuixing was a very powerful master who could make Bai Changchun have a strong desire to fight with him. But how could Bai Changchun take a fancy to a junior who could even defeat Yu Qianqiu? Nongzhu coughed awkwardly and changed the topic. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu and scolded, "Why are you looking at me like that? Maybe you were fooled by his camouflage." Yu Qianqiu was unhappy when he heard that. When he was about to refute, Nongzhu changed her words and said, "But it is also possible that the guy's devil kung fu is magical. He doesn't have to have a high cultivation. Yes, that guy's evil skill is really evil." Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun and nodded in agreement. Bai Changchun shook his head and said, "Evil skill? What could truly be called demonic arts were the cultivation methods of the demonic cultivators in the ancient times, which were even more ancient than the ancient times. But the devil realm has been sealed for countless years. Until now, I've never heard of anyone practicing evil skill. How could there be evil skill without any sign? The devil realm." Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu were stunned at the same time. Both of them were confused. Nongzhu asked suspiciously, "Isn't there only the immortal realm, the underworld, and the human realm? How come there is a devil realm and it's sealed? I've heard of even older legends. Why haven't I heard of the devil realm?" I haven't heard of it before either. But when I took over the demon realm, the former torture envoy mentioned it. Bai Changchun sighed and said, "It's a horrible existence. It once dominated the three realms, and even the immortal realm and the underworld had to bow their heads to it. Later, the devil realm was sealed. The immortal realm and the underworld joined hands to eradicate the evil cultivators in the human realm. They would rather kill the wrong people than let them go. So no one dared to mention the word devil realm for fear of being implicated. Over time, the legend about the devil realm disappeared in the human realm. The evil cultivators in the devil realm are so powerful." Nongzhu swallowed and said, "Why haven't I heard you mention it before?" Bai Changchun glanced at Yu Qianqiu, who was in a daze. Nongzhu looked at him and immediately understood. It seemed that she had benefited from this guy. Bai Changchun mainly said it to him. Bai Changchun looked out of the door and said leisurely, "In ancient times, evil cultivators wreaked havoc and formed their own way, which was called the devil realm. There was a top master of the devil realm who forcibly opened up a fourth realm apart from the immortal realm, the underworld and the human realm, which was called the devil realm. The cultivation of this top master of the devil realm was so powerful that it made the top masters of the immortal realm and the underworld tremble. In the end, he broke through the known peak of cultivation in the four realms and ascended to the legendary and illusory divine realm. This person was recognized as the first master of the devil realm since the beginning of the devil realm. He was called the devil god by the later generations of the devil realm." Chapter 700. The Devil God. Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu both murmured with fascination. A magnificent scene appeared in their minds, in which a peerless genius stood between heaven and earth. They couldn't see his face clearly, but the wind was blowing, the heroes were chasing after the deer, and the demons were dancing wildly. But he was the only one. Just think about it. During that era, where experts were numerous like trees in a forest, how could a peerless genius who was able to look down upon all experts, shake the three dimensions with his might, and forcefully open up a world of his own? How could others not be fascinated by him? Bai Changchun continued slowly. It was also because he went to the divine realm that the devil realm lost its pillar. Many years later, the devil realm gradually declined, and finally the immortal realm and the underworld had the opportunity to raise their heads, which led to the fate of the devil realm being sealed. He sighed again and said, "It's a pity that we were not born at the right time and couldn't see the peerless glory of the devil god. If we could fight with him, we would die without regret." These words caused Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu to look at each other and roll their eyes. They muttered in their hearts, "Old fellow, you're biting off more than you can chew. Although you're formidable, you're still far behind the devil god. The devil god is a master of the divine realm. With your cultivation, are you qualified to fight with him?" The room was quiet, and Bai Changchun still looked leisurely and fascinated. Yu Qianqiu secretly glanced at him and quietly counted his fingers repeatedly. As a disciple, it was not appropriate for him to criticize his master for reaching beyond his grasp. Nongzhu suddenly coughed and smiled awkwardly. "Old Bai, the times are different, and each has its own talent. Speaking of which, as the first master in the world, your status in the cultivation world is no different from that of the devil god. Many people admire you. So why do you admire the ancients?" "Ha! It's a little unrealistic. Let's think about the present and the future." Bai Changchun shook his head slightly and said firmly, "After learning the legend of the devil god from the former torture envoy, I often look up to the vast sky and have a goal to strive for in my life. I look forward to one day learning from the devil god, so that my cultivation will not be in vain. Maybe you think I'm a little ambitious, but I think it's not impossible because the great way is endless." The scope of the old man's goal was too great. Yu Qianqiu's eyes were focused on his nose was focused on his heart, his eyes were focused, he counted on his fingers without saying a word. Nongzhu couldn't help but murmur, "You won't be able to see the devil god. Wait until you see the demonic monarch, the immortal emperor, and the emperor of hell." I remember now. Yu Qianshou suddenly raised his head and said, Yan Zhuixing is related to the 10,000 demons, the number one sect in China's cultivation world. His father, Yan Bugue, is from the 10,000 demons, and his grandfather was the previous sect leader of the 10,000 demons. Master, do you think that the 10,000 demons are related to the ancient devil Dao? These are two completely unrelated matters. Bai Changchun said indifferently, the current devil Dao and the ancient devil Dao are not the same thing. The real devil Dao is quite complicated. Human, ghost, and demon can all be classified as devil Dao. The reason why there were devil cultivators in ancient times is that after the world was created, those pioneers of cultivation had no standard cultivation methods. In order to survive in the savage and dangerous era, they had no choice but to create all kinds of cultivation techniques. Because they were pioneers of cultivation, no one gave them advice on how to avoid risks. Therefore, many people, demons, and ghosts went astray and became possessed by the devil. These people, demons, and ghosts who went astray and became possessed by the devil were collectively called devil cultivators. They were the pioneers of the devil Dao. Among them, there were many peerless talents, and the devil god was the best. How could the current devil Dao and the 10,000 demons compare to them? So that's how it is. Yu Qianshou suddenly realized. Nongzhu clicked her tongue and said, I didn't expect that a group of people who went astray could suppress the people of the immortal world and the underworld. That's really amazing. Bai Changchun stared at him and snorted. Even if they went astray and became possessed by the devil, do you think those who can create their own cultivation methods are ordinary people? Which one of them is not a peerless talent with a mind and talent beyond ordinary people? Because of the danger in the wild, except for those big tribes, many people live in a precarious state at any time. The cultivation methods created by these people are all aimed at quick success, bloodshed, brutality, killing, and great power. In order to save their lives, there is nothing they don't dare to do. After all, the devil Dao is also forced out. Nongzhu nodded slowly and sighed. Yes, it was only in that kind of precarious living environment that so many amazing talents could be produced. If it were now, who would dare to risk their lives to practice at random? There is no ready-made cultivation method to practice properly. Now I finally understand why countless amazing legends that can't be replicated always appear in that ancient and dangerous wild era. I couldn't figure it out before, but it turns out that they're all forced out. Respectable. What a group of people. No wonder they can suppress the immortal world and the underworld. Yu Qianshou also nodded silently. If a person wasn't forced into a dead end, how many of them would risk their lives and take a risk out of desperation? This is similar to the saying in his previous life that heroes are born in troubled times. In a peaceful environment, there are not so many heroes. Bai Changchun looked at Yu Qianshou, who was silent, and asked, You came to me to ask about this? Yu Qianshou suddenly came back to his senses. Seeing that his master and Nongzhu were staring at him, he scratched his head and said with an embarrassed smile, I heard that the Eastern Holy Land is about to open, so I came back to ask Master if you really want to go there. Yes. Bai Changchun nodded indifferently and said, I have contacted ancestor Nanming of Xian Island. In a few days, I will go to Xian Island to settle down temporarily and wait for the East Holy Land to open. Nongzhu's expression also became solemn. She stared at Yu Qianshou and interrupted, Your master was about to ask me to call you back to talk about this. I didn't expect you to come back in advance. It saves me the trouble of looking for you everywhere. Yu Qianshou asked weakly, Master, can I not go? He knew clearly that once Bai Changchun left, his life would not be so good. Nongzhu nodded in agreement and said, Yes. Old Bai, think about it again. In any case, your current physical body has already extended your lifespan by another 200 years. With these 200 years, with your aptitude, it's not impossible for you to break through again. Why do you want to go to that place of no return? Isn't it pretty good here? As she said, she raised her hand and pointed at Yu Qianshou and said, Once you leave, this guy will be in big trouble. He has offended so many people. There are a lot of people who want to kill him. Yu Qianqiu nodded honestly and said, Yes, yes. Nongzhu, you worry too much. Bai Changchun said calmly, Even if you and I are killed, it is not certain that anyone can kill him. Yu Qianqiu was stunned and then said with a bitter smile, Master, aren't you mocking me? Nongzhu looked up and down at Yu Qianqiu as if she was looking at a monster. She knew that Bai Changchun would not lie. There must be a reason for him to say such a thing. Bai Changchun said indifferently, I heard from Nongzhu that when you were expelled from Ong Kuang Tsung, you had a close relationship with a white fox who had been cultivating for 1,000 years. You also wrote several songs for her. Is that true? Nongzhu was a little confused. When she knew that Yu Qianqiu, the scum of the cultivation world, was accepted as a disciple by Bai Changchun, she told Bai Changchun about the story of this scum of the cultivation world. It had been a long time. She didn't know why Bai Changchun brought it up again. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He also didn't know why Bai Changchun asked this question. He thought it was not a secret, so he nodded and admitted it. That's right. Bai Changchun stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, I'll tell you one thing, and you'll understand. Many years ago, I comprehended a set of incantations somewhere in the cultivation world of Huaxia. I accidentally hit a treasure from a deep mountain. After I carefully examined it, I understood what it was. For this thing to fall into my hands, it might be the will of the heavens that it belongs to me. When I was hesitating whether to rely on myself or the treasure, a white fox who had been cultivating for 1,000 years suddenly rushed in. Maybe it was attracted by the movement of my cultivation. Looking back on my life of cultivation, I always relied on myself. There was no need to rely on treasures. At that time, I made up my mind to abandon the treasure and watched it be taken away by the white fox. When I accepted you as a disciple, I was just curious about your abnormality. I wanted to explore it slowly. Later, combined with the relationship between you and the white fox that Nongzhu told me, I immediately guessed that the thing in the white fox's hands was in your hands. If this isn't God's will, then what is? I didn't expect that the thing that I didn't want would come to me in a roundabout way. Moreover, it appeared at the right time. Yu Qianqiu, do you understand what I'm talking about now? Nongzhu was confused. She interrupted first and said, What are you talking about? Bai Changchun's words were very obvious. How could Yu Qianqiu not know what he was talking about? He was naturally referring to the golden bead. He was a little dumbfounded. It seemed that the old man already knew that he had the golden bead. From what he said, he seemed to know the use of the golden bead. Master, I really didn't mean to hide it. Yu Qianqiu immediately got up and knelt down. He was a little panicked. This old man couldn't tolerate sand in his eyes. He was even prepared to run away. Bai Changchun waved his hand and said, This thing is extraordinary. It's our not to say it. Don't mention it to anyone in the future. You will need it for many things in the future. I can also go to the Eastern Holy Land with peace of mind because of it. If the heavens have feelings, the heavens will also grow old. This is God's will. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's beating heart finally calmed down. He then asked suspiciously, Master, what is this thing called? What are its uses? Bai Changchun was stunned. He stared deeply at Yu Qianqiu for a while and said slowly, Since you don't know, then don't ask anymore. When the time comes, you will naturally know. This is God's will. You don't need to ask anyone. Do you understand? Chapter 701. It would be strange if he could understand it. Yu Qianqiu answered submissively. In fact, he hated it when people talked about God's will. If so, he deserved to be killed by lightning in his previous life. He was depressed at the thought of it. However, it was strange that the golden bead that Bai Sujin gave him belonged to Bai Changchun. After it fell into his hands, he became Bai Changchun's disciple. It was really a big circle. Nongzhu felt that she had missed something wonderful. She asked anxiously, What treasure are you talking about? Tell me about it. Bai Changchun glanced at her and said, Don't ask about things that you shouldn't know. Nongzhu's face fell immediately. She said in a muffled voice, Old Bai, you're not a good friend. Why are you still hiding it from me when you've already said so much? Bai Changchun ignored her and said quietly, After I leave, The demon realm needs the next torture envoy. Hearing this, the room suddenly became quiet. Yu Qianqiu began to count his fingers again. To be honest, he was not interested in the torture envoy of the demon realm at all. It seemed that the responsibility was more important than the benefits. Nongzhu was no longer angry. She turned her head casually and looked out of the door. She murmured, "The weather outside seems good. Yu Qianqiu, from today on, I will hand over the demon realm to you." Bai Changchun said bluntly, without any beating around the bush. Nongzhu was stunned for a moment, and then let out a sigh of relief. She cupped one hand in the other before her chest to Yu Qianqiu, whose face was full of astonishment, and jokingly said, "Yu Qianqiu, congratulations. Congratulations on finally becoming the world-famous torture master of the demon region." Yu Qianqiu came to himself and waved his hands repeatedly. "Master, I can't do it. I really can't do it. You'd better give it to someone else." Bai Changchun said with a blank face, "Oh, who do you think is suitable?" "Him." Yu Qianqiu pointed at Nongzhu without hesitation. There were only 3 people here. If he did not drag Nongzhu down with him, who else would he drag? Yu Qianqiu said eloquently, "Senior Nongzhu's cultivation is higher than mine, and she has many friends in the cultivation world. If there is any trouble, she can find many people to help her. I can't do that. I have a lot of enemies to begin with, and I have a lot of problems to deal with. I don't have the time to manage the devil domain. The burden is too heavy for me to bear." "Bullshit." Nongzhu immediately jumped up, pointed at Yu Qianqiu's nose and scolded, "Don't involve me in the matter between you two, or don't blame me for being rude." Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth. If it wasn't for Bai Changchun, he would have scolded him back. Bai Changchun gently waved his hand and said, "Nongzhu, you go out first. I need to talk to him alone." Nongzhu rolled her eyes and sat down. She said with a smile, "Old Bai, you really have a lot of secrets. What secrets do you have? Let me listen to them. I promise I won't disturb you too. I'll only bring my ears and not my mouth." You change your face faster than turning the page of a book. What a fickle villain. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the mulberry tree and scolded the locust tree. Nongzhu's expression didn't change. She kept her mouth shut and let him scold her with a smile. She had entered the state of only bringing her ears and not her mouth. Who would have thought that Bai Changchun would only say a few words, and he would immediately flee in defeat? Bai Changchun said, "Some secrets can only be told to the next torture envoy of the devil domain. If you really want to hear it, I'll take it that you agree to be the next torture envoy." Watching Nongzhu leave, Yu Qianqiu suddenly became listless. Bai Changchun waved his hand, and the soundproof bounded domain was instantly formed. Nongzhu wandered outside the room for a while. She knew that it was impossible for her to eavesdrop under Bai Changchun's nose with her cultivation. She waved her hand and walked out. But when she saw Ziyi chatting with Hibiscus by the 1,000-mile lake, she suddenly became worried. Although she didn't want to be the torture envoy of the devil domain, for Ziyi's sake, she didn't want Yu Qianqiu to be the torture envoy. If the news that Yu Qianqiu was in charge of the devil domain was spread out, the devil domain would definitely become the target of public criticism, because Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was too weak to deter those with ulterior motives. The vast devil domain would probably become a hotspot for all forces to compete for. Yu Qianqiu's fate was worrying. Without Bai Changchun's deterrence, those experts at the late stage of Huashan realm would be like wild horses running wild in the cultivation world. Few people in the world could restrain them. Nongzhu admitted that she couldn't stop them with her cultivation. The only way was to ask Wen Lanfeng to take charge, but this was not a long-term solution. What was Bai Changchun thinking? He actually dared to give such a heavy responsibility of the devil domain to Yu Qianqiu. Wasn't he afraid that Yu Qianqiu would mess it up and even lose his life? This was simply harming him. Nongzhu shook her head in confusion, but then she remembered what Bai Changchun said before. Did Yu Qianqiu really have a life-saving magic weapon? Logically speaking, Bai Changchun was not a person who made rash decisions. There must be a reason for him to do so. Thinking of this, Nongzhu was more or less confident. Even so, he kept walking around the island, anxiously waiting for the result of the conversation between the master and the disciple in the center of the island. He hoped that the conversation between the master and the disciple would break down and Bai Changchun would not leave. That would be the best result. It should be known that once Bai Changchun left, the world would be in chaos. The sun went from high in the sky to the west, and then from the west to the night, until the night was full of stars and the bright moon was in the sky. There was no movement in the room. Nongzhu didn't know what the master and the disciple were talking about for such a long time. Furong and Zi were also a little impatient. They asked Nongzhu several times, but Nongzhu just answered perfunctorily. So the two girls returned to the lake, back to back, and stayed up for the night. When the sun shone from the east again, the conversation between the master and the disciple in the room came to an end. Yu Qianqiu didn't know when he moved to the opposite side of Bai Changchun. The master and the disciple talked face to face for nearly a whole day. Yu Qianqiu sat quietly in the same place, digesting the secrets that belonged to the former torturers. Bai Changchun said a lot during the day's conversation, and Yu Qianqiu also asked a lot of questions. Bai Changchun answered all his questions. The more he knew, the more serious Yu Qianqiu looked. He didn't expect that the devil domain had so many secrets. That's right, master. Yu Qianqiu suddenly raised his head and said, "There's something I forgot to ask, master. I once followed the flame eye of Twilight Valley's blue fire underground and saw a few inconceivable things." Bai Changchun froze. "There's something under the flame eye of the blue fire? What did you see?" Even master doesn't know. Yu Qianqiu found this rather strange, and then he gestured with his hand. Below that is a massive underground space flowing with lava. It's an extremely spectacular sight. Several massive blue lotuses grew on the river of lava, and Twilight Valley's blue fire came from these lotuses. Most inconceivable of all was that there was a naked child sleeping on one of the lotuses, not the slightest bit afraid of the blue fire. Bai Changchun stroked his beard and said, "You mean to say that the child was sleeping naked in the blue fire?" "Yes. There's something even more inconceivable than that." Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue. "At the time, I struck the child awake, but who knew that the child would jump straight into the roiling lava as if he were swimming in a river? Because I struck him, the child dived into the lava and found a helper. The helper he found was too frightening. It was a savage, majestic, and dignified dragon. Damn, this is the first time in my life that I've seen a living dragon." "A dragon?" Bai Changchun suddenly stood up and gravely asked, "Are you sure you didn't see wrong? It really was a dragon?" Yu Qianqiu also stood up and gestured at the dragon's appearance. It should have been a dragon, and a red one at that. Its entire body was covered in bright red scales, and I could sense a majestic and ancient aura the moment it appeared. But strangely, I seemed to see that the dragon's claws were locked down by dazzling golden chains, and the chains seemed to be connected to the bottom of the lava. I don't know if I saw wrong, but who would have the ability to lock down a dragon? I was scared out of my wits and didn't dare to look further, so I used the miraculous effect of the golden bead to escape. After gesturing, Yu Qianqiu asked again, "Master, didn't you say that the dragon mount of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord was red? Could that dragon be the one that belonged to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord?" Bai Changchun pondered for a while and slowly nodded. "It should be. I didn't expect the legend to be true." He then turned to Yu Qianqiu and explained, "The previous torture envoy mentioned it once. If you hadn't mentioned it, I would have forgotten about it. Regarding that dragon, there are two theories. The premise is that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord was severely injured. The first theory is that the Myriad Swords Demon Lord knew that he couldn't hold on any longer, so he gave the dragon its freedom, and the dragon soared into the sky. This matter was too mysterious. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask, could the second theory be that the dragon was locked underground? The second theory doesn't make sense. Otherwise, the first torture envoy who knew what happened would know where the dragon was, unless he deliberately kept it secret. Now it seems that he must have witnessed what happened with his own eyes, but he deliberately hid it and passed it down as a legend. Bai Changchun explained, "This theory is also because the Myriad Sword's demon lord knew that he couldn't hold on any longer, so he was afraid that the dragon would avenge him on impulse. He knew that the dragon was no match for him, so he locked it deep underground. At the same time, he told the dragon that retribution is inevitable. When someone has the ability to break the shackles he placed on the dragon and release it, that person will be the fated person who has the ability to avenge the Myriad Sword's demon lord. The dragon will then come out and help the fated person to avenge the Myriad Sword's demon lord." That doesn't make sense. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin and raised his eyebrows. How could others know about the conversation between the Myriad Sword's demon lord and the dragon? Those who knew about it were either there at the time, or the Myriad Sword's demon lord passed on the message. The former is more likely. Otherwise, the Myriad Sword's demon lord would have no reason to tell others about the agreement between him and the dragon. There's no need to speculate anymore. Bai Changchun sighed. "Since you've already seen the dragon underground, it means that the second theory is true. I didn't expect that. The dragon has always been underground in the demon domain, keeping its promise with the Myriad Sword's demon lord and waiting for the fated person. I really don't know how it survived such a long time." Chapter 702. On the side, Yu Qianqiu sighed endlessly. Divine dragons were locked underground not for hundreds or thousands of years, but for tens of thousands of years at every turn. Who could say for sure how many years had passed since the ancient times? But it was probably more than 100,000 years. It was terrifying to think about being locked up for so many years. Just as he was shaking his head with his master, Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said excitedly, "Master, why don't we think of a way to release the divine dragon? Think about it. We're both abiding by the agreement with the demon lord of 10,000 swords, so we should be on the same side. A divine dragon, a god-tier expert, with a divine dragon guarding the devil domain. Who in the world would dare to do anything to the devil domain?" The more he spoke, the more excited he became. Even he admired his own cleverness for coming up with such a good idea. He couldn't help but laugh sinisterly. Bai Changchun looked at him speechlessly. It was hard to associate his disciple's expression with that of a good person. He then said coldly, "It's true that the divine dragon's cultivation is high, but don't misunderstand. The divine dragon is also a member of the divine beasts. Just because it has the word divine doesn't mean it's a god-tier expert." Yu Qianqiu's sinister laughter stopped abruptly, and his expression twitched. "Master, you mean that the divine dragon isn't necessarily very powerful?" Bai Changchun nodded. "It's not that it's not powerful, but the so-called divine beasts are beasts with supernatural powers. They have innate advantages that other beasts can't compare to. After cultivation, they all have the possibility of reaching the god tier. As for other beasts, it's not so easy to reach the god tier. The divine dragon's cultivation definitely hasn't reached the god tier. You should know that the demon lord of 10,000 swords didn't even reach the god tier when he died. Think about it. How could he control a god tier dragon? If the divine dragon really reached the god tier, the demon lord of 10,000 swords wouldn't have died with the divine dragon protecting him. Even with the Myriad Sword's demon monarch's cultivation, he wouldn't be able to trap the divine dragon underground for so many years. I'm afraid that the divine dragon has already broken free from its shackles and escaped. Even if its cultivation hasn't reached the god level, it's probably many times stronger than the experts in the cultivation world, right?" Yu Qianqiu said weakly. Judging from his tone, he seemed to be unwilling to give up. It seemed like he really wanted to get a divine dragon to protect him. Bai Changchun nodded slightly and said, "The masters of the cultivation world definitely can't be compared to the divine dragon. Although the divine dragon is not a match for the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld, it is still qualified to fight against them. Think about it. How can the masters of the cultivation world be compared to it? At least my current cultivation is definitely not comparable to the divine dragon. Then isn't it just right to let it out to guard the demon region?" Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't help but voice his desire. At this time, his mind was not thinking about letting the dragon god protect the devil's domain. Instead, he was thinking about building a relationship with the dragon god. When the time came, he would have the final say in the cultivation world. He could do whatever he wanted, and he would not have to work so hard anymore. I advise you to give up on this idea. Bai Changchun stared at him coldly and said in a deep voice, "The world is full of changes. The dragon god has been detained for so many years. No one knows what it is thinking now. Can you guarantee that it will be a good thing if it is released? Once its bestial nature is unleashed, it will definitely bring disaster to the whole world. When that time comes, who can control it? Can you control it? This must be one of the reasons why the Demon Lord of Swords detained it. Moreover, the shackles that the Demon Lord of Swords set on the Dragon God cannot be broken with the Dragon God's cultivation. Do you think that the two of us can break it with our cultivation?" Hee hee. I was just saying it casually. If it doesn't work, then forget it. Hee hee. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. He was also shocked when he thought of the scene of the red guy roaring to the world and going berserk. He was just thinking of using the gold technique that he cultivated to try and break the shackles of the dragon god. Now it seemed that it was better to let the dragon continue to stay underground. He did not want to go for wool and come home shorn. When the time came, he would not be able to help but become a scourge instead. I have told you everything that needs to be said. If there is nothing else. Bai Changchun looked out the door slowly and sighed leisurely. Then, my mission is completed. It is time to go. He had always been calm, but now his words were filled with complicated emotions. Yu Qianqiu closed his lips tightly and looked at his master, who was sighing. He was a little speechless. No matter how cold-hearted his master was, leaving this place where he had stayed for thousands of years would be a little emotional. According to his master, he was the one who had been in charge of the demon region for the longest time among all the torturers. Moreover, his master was not a cold-hearted person. He was just a warm person on the inside and cold on the outside. Yu Qianqiu slowly lowered his head and said with a trembling voice, "Master, why don't you not leave? I'm afraid I can't handle it alone. In fact, I wanted to leave 300 years ago. Unfortunately, I haven't found a suitable person to take charge of the demon region. That's why it has been delayed until now." Bai Changchun showed a rare smile and said with a faint smile, "Now it is time to leave. I believe you can do it well. Even if you can't do it well, there must be a reason for this." Yu Qianqiu looked up and said, "Master, don't you think Senior Wen Lanfeng is more suitable to take charge of the demon region? He is not a bad person. No one in the cultivation world is his match except for you. I want someone who can shoulder a heavy burden, not a good person. If a good person can solve the problem, there are many better people in the world. Why do I need to find him?" Bai Changchun snorted and said, "Even if you didn't appear, Wen Lanfeng would at most be my second choice. I spared his life twice just in case. If there is no other way, I will let him take charge of the demon region." Yu Qianqiu was stunned and could not help asking why. Bai Changchun showed an air of arrogance and said, "Wen Lanfeng, this person's cultivation talent is indeed good compared to others. In terms of cultivation, he is indeed suitable to take charge of the demon region. But this person is decisive. A woman can make him dizzy. He has a gentle personality and lacks ruthlessness in handling things. As a person who controls the overall situation, these are his fatal weaknesses. If he takes charge of the demon region, he will be used by people with ulterior motives sooner or later. If I really entrust the demon region to him, I am afraid I will first have to massacre all the soul formation masters in the world before I can be more or less relieved. But even so, it is not a long-term solution. A fatal weakness is a fatal weakness, and it is difficult to change. If I kill this group of people who can use him, there will be another group of people who can use him. I can't kill everyone in the world for the demon region, right?" As he said this, he looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "But you are different. I have been silently observing you for a long time. On the surface, you do things by hook or by crook to achieve your goals. You are even cruel and merciless, but you always have a kind heart. This prevents you from being unable to control your ambition and becoming an ambitious person. A person who controls the overall situation can't be soft-hearted. You should be decisive when things happen. Thunder and blood are all means, not results, so you must know right from wrong, good from evil, and right from wrong. In this regard, you are more suitable to take charge of the demon region than Nongju. As for other reasons, I will not say. Damn it, is this a compliment or a scolding? Yu Qianshou touched his nose awkwardly and quickly changed the topic. Then who is the first candidate? Is it Senior Nongju? Yes, not only did the former punishment commissioner take a fancy to him, but so did I. Bai Changchun snorted and said, I wanted Nongju to take over, but this guy has been running away. For this reason, he even suppressed his cultivation and did not break through to the late stage of soul formation. He really wants to live a carefree life. Don't look down on Nongju. Nongju's talent for cultivation is not worse than Wen Lanfeng's, and it is even better. He only suppressed his cultivation and did not break through to prevent me from finding a reason to let him take over as the punishment commissioner. Does he think that I can't see through him? I guess after I leave, even if it is to protect himself, he will not take long to break through to the late stage of soul formation. That's good. You can have a helper. Damn it. You win. Yu Qianshou hated Nongju very much. In order to escape responsibility, he even suppressed his cultivation and did not break through. Damn it. You set me up. No, I can't let him take advantage of me. Master, after careful consideration, I think Senior Nongju is more suitable to take charge of the demon region. Then he patted his chest and promised, Master, don't worry. Leave it to me. I have a way to make him accept the position of punishment commissioner. I will go to him now. No need. Bai Changchun stopped him coldly and looked outside the door. He said expressionlessly, he is destined to have a relationship with the demon region in this life. No matter how far he runs, he has to come back. Then he stared at Yu Qianshou and said, Isn't it good to have a master at the late stage of soul formation to run errands for you? Yu Qianshou felt wronged and said, That guy is very cunning. He often goes against me now. Once he breaks through to the late stage of soul formation, how can I order him around? You don't have to worry about that. Even if he pretends to be stupid, there will be someone who can order him around. Bai Changchun snorted and said, Does he think that he can live freely for the rest of his life without being in charge of the demon region? What a joke. What you owe me, you better pay me back. Yu Qianshou looked at Bai Changchun suspiciously. It was the first time that he heard Bai Changchun say something like this. He seemed to smell a trace of conspiracy. He had a premonition that Nongju's life in the future would not be so easy. The old guy had obviously dug a trap for Nongju. A trap dug by the world's top master. Damn it, she would definitely be killed. Yu Qianshou was overjoyed when he thought that Nongju would be in trouble. But when he thought that he would have to shoulder more responsibilities, he couldn't be happy anymore. What a bitter life. Seeing his bitter face, Bai Changchun put down his hands behind his back and stretched out one hand. He opened his palm and showed a bunch of silver balls. He said calmly, If these things really have the effect you said, you can come to me if you really have any trouble that you can't solve. Of course, the premise is that I am still alive. Chapter 703. Master is the #1 expert in the world. No matter how mysterious the East Holy Land is, it's still in this world. Who can hurt Master? If there's any trouble, I'll definitely come to you. Yu Qianshou answered bluntly, his face smiling like a chrysanthemum. Since Bai Changchun already knew about the golden bead, Yu Qianshou also tactfully told Bai Changchun about the space of the golden bead and gave him a lot of silver beads. His original idea was to take advantage of Bai Changchun's convenience to go to the East Holy Land and find a chance to gain experience there. How could he forget that he could still invite this great master back if there was any trouble? My trump card is still there. I'm not afraid. The happy Yu Qianshou was already imagining. If some people really went too far when he invited Bai Changchun back, oh my God, That scene will definitely be very exciting, sweetheart. This guy was actually secretly looking forward to someone coming to the demon region to find trouble. But he was more or less worried that something would happen to Bai Changchun in the East Holy Land. The evil smile on his face betrayed his thoughts. Seeing him like this, Bai Changchun's face turned cold, and he said in a low voice, "Don't come to me if you can solve the problem yourself. Go out and call Ziyi here. I have something to talk to her alone." Seeing that the old guy was angry, Yu Qianzhou's heart trembled and his smile froze. He nodded and bowed and hurriedly ran out. Once out of the big house, his steps became leisurely again, and he walked calmly to the side of the 1,000 Miles Lake. The few people by the lake all noticed him and flashed over. Looking at his proud face, they didn't know what treasure he had picked up. Nongzhu touched her chin and was puzzled. Previously, in order to refuse the position of torture envoy, this guy fought with her so fiercely. Why did he look so relaxed now? Could it be that this cunning guy got rid of the position? Her man finally came out. Furong's eyes were smiling, more beautiful than the crescent moon at night. Ziyi asked with an envious face. "Yu Qianzhou, Senior, I talked to you alone for such a long time. Did he teach you something good again?" She knew that Bai Changchun had always treated people coldly and was a man of few words. It was simply unheard of for him to talk through the night like this. Yu Qianzhou acted like a vile person who had the upper hand. He pointed at Ziyi's beautiful nose and said, "My master has something to say to you in private. Hurry up, don't make my master unhappy." Ziyi's mouth was wide open. She had never spoken to Elder by alone before, and now he actually summoned her. Ziyi was excited and nervous at the same time. She was at a loss of what to do. She stammered, "Really? Oh, I'll go now." Nongzhu rolled her eyes and looked at Ziyi hurriedly rushing to the big house and respectfully entering the door. Why was Ziyi's words more effective than her own master's? Yu Qianzhou strolled to the lakeside and began to do some broadcasted gymnastics exercises. He looked at the vast demon domain in the distance and was in a good mood. "From today onwards, this is my territory." Nongzhu and Furong looked at each other. Then Nongzhu flashed over and pretended to accompany him to do chest-stretching exercises. She asked casually, "That Yu Qianzhou? Why did your master call Ziyi in?" Without turning his head, Yu Qianzhou said, "How would I know? You can ask Ziyi later." Being rejected, Nongzhu was not angry. She said, "What did you say to old Bai? Why did you take so long to speak? What did they say? Tell me, and I'll see if I can give you some advice." Yu Qianzhou withdrew his arm and turned around to look at her. He asked, "Do you really want to know?" Nongzhu looked back at the direction of the big house guiltily and said in a low voice, "Don't worry. I just want to listen and give you some advice. I won't tell anyone. If you don't believe me, I can swear." Yu Qianzhou snorted and stared at him and said with a cold smile, "You're also too despicable. My master said that he had found out long ago that you suppressed your cultivation and didn't break through in order to avoid being a torture master. You are so boring. If you don't want to be a torture master, just give up. Why do you have to play tricks with your old friend? Touch your own conscience and tell me, how can you feel at ease?" The wind was blowing by the lake, and Nongzhu's heart was a little cold. Bai Changchun had found out long ago, but he didn't mention it. What was he up to? Thinking of Bai Changchun's means, every time he talked to her, he looked at her with a sneer in his heart. Nongzhu immediately shivered. Based on his character, he was really tolerant of her for so many years and didn't punish her. Nongzhu felt lucky and thanked Bai Changchun for his generosity, but she felt that something was wrong. She looked at the direction of the big house guiltily again and asked in a low voice, "Yu Qianzhou, don't fool me. You can't talk about me for so long, can you? What else? You know, there are some words that can't be said to you." Yu Qianzhou left after saying that and went to flirt with Furong. Nongzhu pulled a long face. Not long after, Ziyi came out. She had a serious expression on her face. She walked over and looked at Yu Qianzhou firmly, as if saying, "I will support you." Yu Qianzhou was confused and didn't know what Bai Changchun had said to her. Nongzhu immediately went over with a smile and asked, "My dear apprentice, what did Senior Bai say to you? Come on, tell me. so that I can give you some advice. Ziyi's firm eyes softened, and she pouted her mouth in grievance. Master, I promised Senior by that I wouldn't tell anyone. Don't force me, okay? Nongju's face was completely dark. The muscles on her face twitched for a while, but she still squeezed out a smile and said, Haha, don't be angry. I won't force you. In fact, behind the smile, two tightly clenched fists were making a muffled sound. Yu Qianshou, that brat, did not say anything, but even his own disciple did not pay attention to him. However, he dared to wrong anyone, but he could not bear to wrong Ziyi. Thus, he could only let himself be wronged and sulk. Seeing this scene, Yu Qianshou turned around and smiled, like a fox that had stolen chicken. He was happy to see Nongju being defeated. Nongju! By Changchun's voice, Yu Qianshou suddenly turned around and saw that Bai Changchun had appeared here at some point in time. The expressions of the juniors became respectful. Nongju said with a gloomy face, What's the matter? Bai Changchun stared at him with a faint smile and said slowly, We have known each other for many years. From today on, I'm afraid we have to separate. There was a touch of nostalgia in his tone. It was not easy to hear such a tone from Bai Changchun's mouth. Nongju was stunned, and his face returned to normal in an instant. All his anger disappeared. Of course, he knew what Bai Changchun's words meant. He was really going to leave for the place that he had never returned from since ancient times. The world's most powerful master for more than 1,000 years, the old friend that he had known for many years, was bidding farewell to him. The past was still vivid in his mind. Thinking back to the time when he traveled through space and time, the originally blurry memories and the things that he usually couldn't even remember suddenly appeared in front of his eyes, as if it was only yesterday. He remembered that he had tricked him to come to the demon ghost region, but he had restrained the world's most powerful master for 1,000 years. He had shouldered the burden that belonged to him. He had let him down. He owed it to him. Senior Bai, Ziyi whimpered. Her eyes were red, and big drops of tears fell down. Her shoulders trembled, and she covered her mouth as she sobbed. She looked at the world's most powerful master with tears in her eyes. She thought about the place he was going to, and that she would never see him again. She couldn't control her emotions, although she had heard that Senior Bai would go to the East Holy Land one day. She didn't expect it to be so soon. Senior Bai just told her personally. Furong was shocked. She didn't know what was going to happen, but she suddenly realized that the atmosphere was not right. Ziyi was crying, and there was a sense of separation between them. Nongju's lips were tightly shut, and she turned to look at the crying Ziyi. Obviously, she already knew. He put his hand on Ziyi's shoulder, stared at Bai Changchun, and said with a smile, Old Bai. His voice was a little hoarse, and his throat was a little dry. He couldn't finish his words, and his face tightened. Yu Qianshou, who knew what was going on, didn't feel anything, but the atmosphere made him feel uncomfortable. He stood at the side and scratched his head. Suddenly, he saw Furong's bewildered expression. He immediately pushed Furong lightly and said, Master has always favored you. Quickly kowtowed to Master. Furong's expression became more and more confused. She didn't know why she had to kowtow, for no reason. However, she always listened to Yu Qianshou's words unconditionally. She immediately knelt down and kowtowed to Bai Changchun. After 3 kowtows, Bai Changchun waved his hand, and Furong couldn't continue kowtowing anymore. She was lifted up by a gentle airflow without any resistance. Hibiscus looked at Yu Qianshou as if she wanted to say something. Yu Qianshou smiled at her, indicating that it was fine. Nongju, Shuntian Island, might not be peaceful during this period of time. Bring Furong and Ziyi to the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest for the time being. As for the rest, Yu Qianshou will naturally arrange it. Bai Changchun said with a faint smile. Furong looked at Yu Qianshou again and revealed a puzzled expression, as if asking, Why do you want me to leave? Yu Qianshou gave her a look, indicating that she should listen to him. Furong immediately didn't have any objections. Old Bai, there's no need to be so anxious. Nongju looked at Yu Qianshou and said, If I leave, what will happen to him? Leave now. Don't make me say more. Bai Changchun looked at the boundless thousand-mile lake and nodded slightly as he looked around. His usually cold face actually maintained a faint smile. Occasionally, a trace of reluctance and longing could be seen in his moving eyes, but it disappeared in a flash. After looking around, his expression suddenly became resolute, and his eyes suddenly looked towards the east. His bright and spirited eyes revealed an unswerving determination to pursue. Chapter 704. Nongzhu stood there for a long time with a complicated expression. Then, she walked away resolutely, threw out a ship-shaped flying celestial device, and jumped on it. Nongzhu stood at the bow of the ship with her back to Bai Changchun, motionless and silent. Yu Qianshou sighed slightly and pushed Furong and Zi towards the flying celestial device. Furong was at a loss, while Zi kept looking back with tears in her eyes. After Yu Qianshou half forcibly put them on the celestial device, Zi finally couldn't help but kneel down. She leaned on the string of the ship and cried bitterly. Senior Bai, no matter how sad Zi was crying, the celestial device flew into the sky with a whoosh. Nongzhu didn't look back from beginning to end. She didn't even say a word. She just stood straight at the bow of the ship and drove the celestial device toward the south. Yu Qianshou quietly walked to Bai Changchun and said, "Master, they're gone." He was obviously talking nonsense. With Bai Changchun's cultivation, how could he not know that they're gone? Bai Changchun looked back at Yu Qianshou expressionlessly and nodded. Yu Qianshou took a few steps back, cupped his hands, and bowed to him solemnly. When he straightened up again, the person in front of him had already disappeared. A black spot in the sky quickly disappeared towards the east. Shuntian Island suddenly became very quiet. Yu Qianshou slowly turned around and looked around. The sun was still shining, the thousand-mile lake was still sparkling, the wind was still blowing, and the grass and trees on the island were still lush and swaying gently. When his eyes fell on the big house in the center of the island, he stopped. The old man who had been sitting in the house for thousands of years had really left. This place belonged to him now. It was like a dream. He actually became the master of this place. What an incredible thing. He was now the 108th torture master of the demon ghost region. Yu Qianshou suddenly felt suffocated. He suddenly turned to the east and shouted loudly, "Master!" His voice echoed in all directions. He suddenly ran to the lakeside, opened his arms, and sang loudly towards the boundless thousand-mile lake. The great river flows to the east. The stars in the sky join the Big Dipper. We're leaving just like that. You have it, I have it, we have it all. Seeing injustice on the road, he roared. When it's time to make a move, make a move. Rushing through the 9 prefectures. Hey, you're F asterisk CK your mother. Before he could finish his song, he ended it with a curse. After singing, shouting, and scolding, he finally felt a lot more comfortable in his heart. Yu Qianshou began to calm down. He stood silently by the side of the thousand-mile lake and gazed into the distance. The blush on his cheeks gradually faded away and returned to normal. On a tall magnolia tree not far away, pure white magnolia flowers bloomed all over the branches, bathing in the sunlight and gently swaying. Lady Mu, who was dressed in snow-white clothes, stood under the tree in a reserved manner. She looked even more delicate than Milan, who was on the branch. Looking at the lonely silhouette by the lake, he hesitated for a long time before walking over. He came to the back of Yu Qianshou and asked softly, "Mister, has the punishment envoy left? Will he come back?" His voice was trembling. She clearly saw what happened here, just now. She saw what she shouldn't have seen, and heard what she shouldn't have heard. She used to be a demon king, so she was naturally more sensible than Hibiscus. Although she didn't know where Bai Changchun was going, she vaguely guessed that he wouldn't come back. Yu Qianshou snorted coldly. His calm face, which was facing the thousand-mile lake, instantly changed and became covered with a layer of frost. A majestic, gloomy, and terrifying aura instantly erupted from his upright body and directly enveloped Lady Mu. Endless coldness, endless despair, endless death. All kinds of extremely terrifying negative emotions directly impacted Lady Mu's body and mind. Lady Mu almost instantly lost her desire to live and was about to suffocate. Trembling all over, she directly knelt on the ground and swayed. Her eyes were wide open, and she looked at Yu Qianqiu with infinite fear. She had never imagined that the amiable Mr. Yu would be so terrifying. Just the powerful aura erupting from his body was terrifying enough to kill her. Just how terrifying was the cultivation he was concealing? She had never seen such a terrifying aura in her life. Today was the first time in her life that the man in front of her suddenly made her feel that he was even more terrifying than the Lord Torture Envoy. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around and stared at Lady Mu, who was kneeling on the ground. He said indifferently, with no expression on his face, "The Lord Torture Envoy has left. Do you have any ideas?" No. I was just asking. I was wrong. Sir, please spare my life." Lady Mu's face was pale, but she forced herself not to collapse and tried hard to reply. She knew that she had asked something she shouldn't have. If she didn't explain clearly, the man in front of her could take her life at any time. It would be as easy as killing an ant. She didn't need to doubt him at all. "From today onwards, I am the new torture envoy of the demon domain." Yu Qianqiu turned around and faced the 1,000-mile lake again. With his back facing Lady Mu, he said, "Do you have any objections?" Lady Mu trembled and bowed with difficulty. I pay my respects to the Lord Torture Envoy." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly felt that the terrifying aura had suddenly become stronger. It was so strong that she didn't even have the slightest thought of resisting and directly fainted. When she woke up, she found that the sun was still high in the sky. Obviously, she hadn't fainted for long. She checked her physical condition and found that there was nothing wrong with her except for being a little weak. Obviously, the new Lord Torture Envoy had already spared her. She tilted her head and found that Yu Qianqiu was still standing by the lake. She immediately got up and knelt down. "Thank you, Lord Torture Envoy, for sparing my life. Lady Mu, you haven't given me a massage for a long time." Yu Qianqiu turned around and chuckled. Then he took off his clothes and jumped into the lake, swimming 2 rounds naked. Lady Mu was stunned. She couldn't get used to the Lord Torture Envoy's reaction, but she understood what he meant by a massage. She immediately walked to the lakeside and gently took off her clothes. In the blink of an eye, an alluring and delicate body appeared. She slowly walked into the lake, and with a wave of her hand, she smoothed out a half-exposed rock on the lake's surface. Yu Qianqiu turned around and swam back, lying directly on the rock. Half of his body was on the rock in the water, while the other half was exposed to the sun. Naked, Lady Mu leaned over and let him massage her slender fingers. She asked softly, "My lord, how's the strength?" Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and grunted. He seemed to be enjoying it very much. His mind was filled with all sorts of nonsense. "I don't have to be cautious in Shuntian Island anymore. I'm in charge of my territory. How great!" His head, which was resting on his arms, tilted over and said, "When you're free, go find the Demon King and the Ghost King to get some fresh fruits. Use a little more strength." "Yes." Lady Mu didn't show any abnormality on her face, but she was filled with caution and reverence in her heart. She was ready to sacrifice herself at any time, but Yu Qianqiu didn't seem to have any intention of touching her at all. After Bai Changchun left, the demon domain became someone's territory. Someone immediately turned the sky upside down and created an unprecedented scene in the demon domain. Sunbathing in the 1,000-mile lake and being massaged by beauties. Such a simple life. The big house in the center of the island silently watched the lively scene by the lake. The open door seemed to be letting out a soundless roar. In the territory of the Xia Empire, the flames of war reached the sky. Wherever Shi Wenguang pointed his sword, the army was invincible. The imperial army didn't even have the strength to fight back. The overwhelming victory made Shi Wenguang's army very spirited. They played a triumphant song all the way. They attacked cities and conquered territories as if they were taking something out of their pocket, and the territory they occupied kept expanding. The imperial court had long been in a panic. They forcefully recruited able-bodied men to replenish the army that was constantly losing in an attempt to protect the shrinking territory. However, the empire was on the verge of collapse, and the hearts of the people were changing. Who could turn the tide for the rotten regime? The various sects in the Huaxia cultivation world watched coldly from the sidelines. They were somewhat curious as to why the Fuxian Island hadn't taken any action yet. Could it be that they were just going to let the imperial power change in the secular world? When the news that Shi Wenguang's backer was Yu Qianqiu spread, the various sects came to a sudden realization. It was a critical moment. The Fuxian Island had no choice but to swallow their anger. For a moment, the Fuxian Island became the joke of the various sections. Back then, they had unceremoniously expelled Yu Qianqiu from the sect. Now, they were finally going to drink the bitter wine that they brewed themselves. However, the attention of the various sects quickly shifted away from this matter. No one cared about the war in the secular world anymore. This was because a piece of news suddenly spread from the various countries. Moreover, it spread like wildfire. It was hard for the Huaxia cultivation world not to know about it. The #1 expert in the world, by Changchun, was going to enter the mysterious East Holy Land. Since the news had spread, the ins and outs of the matter were quickly investigated. The various sects in the Huaxia cultivation world finally understood that the #1 expert in the world was from Huaxia. Moreover, he had been secretly protecting Huaxia. Therefore, the soul formation experts of the various countries hadn't made a move yet. However, once Bai Changchun left, the various countries would definitely launch an all-out attack on the Huaxia cultivation world. For a moment, the various sects in Huaxia panicked. They knew that their good days were coming to an end. At this moment, the various countries were forcefully restraining their disciples. They strictly ordered them not to cause any trouble. Otherwise, they would be severely punished. This was because Bai Changchun's temper was very scary. At this critical moment of his departure, it was possible that he would swiftly reorganize the cultivation world by dealing with the aftermath. This was not just a rumor. It was very possible. Whenever something involved Bai Changchun, the commotion caused would make everyone tremble in fear for a long time. Therefore, no one wanted to provoke Bai Changchun at this moment. For a moment, the entire cultivation world had a rare peace. Everyone was polite and lived in harmony. However, there was also a place that was not peaceful within the borders of Lingfang Valley. All the disciples of Lingfang Valley, together with the thousands of Wen clan disciples that Wen Lanfeng brought, spent a few days searching back and forth within Lingfang Valley several times. They almost turned over every barren mountain and remote corner. However, to Lu Yanqing's disappointment, Exine Lao San and Yin Juixing, who had stolen the 7-star blood orchid, seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Not even a trace of them could be found. Chapter 705. In fact, both Lu Yanqing and Wen Lanfeng knew that Yin Juixing and Exine Lao San had probably escaped. Even if they didn't escape, they couldn't find them under such a large-scale search. The hope of finding them again was slim. However, Exine Lao San refused to give up. He led the disciples of Lingfang Valley and one family to continue searching frantically. Everyone could understand his feelings. 3 of his brothers had died, and one of them might even die. How could he not be anxious? At the peak of the herb hut, 2 figures stood in front of the cliff under the setting sun. One was tall, the other graceful. The lush Lingfang Valley was dyed with a layer of red and yellow by the setting sun. For the next few days, Lu Yanqing stood here most of the time, looking at the deserted Lingfang Valley with a frown. Wen Lanfeng sighed softly. Yanqing, since it's already happened, let's get over it. The eldest, 2nd, 4th, 8th, and 9th are all anxious. I'm useless as a master. I can't even protect the disciples under my nose. I'm sorry. If it wasn't for the eldest, 2nd, 4th and 8th going out to collect herbs recently, I'm afraid. Lu Yanqing shook her head in pain. When Lanfeng comforted her, "It's not your fault." Who knew that after Yin Zhuixing escaped from Cornucopia, he would hide in your Lingfang Valley? Otherwise, he would have attracted a group of people to hunt him down. How could we allow him to cause trouble here? No, it's all my fault. Lu Yanqing muttered to herself. If I didn't stop Yu Qianqiu at Cornucopia, there wouldn't be today. Do you remember what Yu Qianqiu said at that time? He said, "You let the people of Ice Palace go today. If the people of Ice Palace hurt Lingfang Valley in the future, I hope you won't regret it." Ha! She looked back at Wen Lanfeng with a sad smile and said, "It's really a prophecy." Unfortunately, he was right. Wen Lanfeng, don't you think I deserve it? Wen Lanfeng was startled. That's not true. Don't listen to that guy's nonsense. Speaking of Yu Qianqiu, Lu Yanqing seemed to have thought of something. Her self-reproachful expression became a little more restrained, and she said in a bleak tone, "I reckon that Lao San is no longer in the Lingfang Valley. Let your Wen family's disciples withdraw. Bai Changchun is about to leave, and many people are rushing to see him off. You should also go and see him off. Let's keep looking. If you don't look for it, then there's no hope of finding it." Wen Lanfeng tactfully refused. In fact, he also wanted to take this opportunity to accompany Lu Yanqing. Seeing that Lu Yanqing still wanted to persuade him, he couldn't help but smile and said, "Everyone knows what those people who are going to send Bai Changchun off are thinking. They just want to personally see Bai Changchun enter the Eastern Sacred Lands so that they can plan for the future. Otherwise, they won't be able to eat or sleep well." I won't join in the fun, lest Bai Changchun misunderstands. Lu Yanqing paused for a moment and nodded slightly. As the two of them chatted, they began to guess who would succeed as the Demon Realm's torture master. Under the night sky, in the vast land of Di Rong Kingdom, there were undulating mountains. Some were steep, some were tall, and some were flat. Under the cover of the white snow, they had lost their edges and corners, forming a gentle and beautiful white curve. The bright moonlight reflected off the pure white snow, forming a silver light all over the mountains. This was a world of snow, and the cultivation world called this place the Great Snow Mountain. On the highest peak of the towering mountain, a majestic palace made of ice stood tall. Under the moonlight, the ice palace was sparkling, showing off its cold and poignant beauty on the peak of the mountain. And this seemingly cold ice palace, in fact, was loose on the outside but tense on the inside. The 6 disciples of Bing Changzi were carefully watching the outside of the palace, and Third Xian was among them. Yanbu Gui anxiously paced back and forth in the palace. He was able to come here thanks to the 2 disciples of Bing Changzi, a group of disciples of the Ice Palace, and a group of old subordinates who risked their lives to escort him out of the Limitless Island. However, the moment he arrived here, he coincidentally saw Yin Zhuixing, who was personally escorted by Bing Chengzi. It was a good thing for father and son to meet each other, but Yin Zhuixing's appearance really shocked Yan Bugui. His son looked haggard and had lost an arm, which instantly made Yan Bugui's heart feel like it was being cut by a knife. He had nothing now. His home was gone, and the Limitless Island was gone. If his son was gone, he really didn't know where to go. Bing Chengzi had brought Yin Zhuixing into the secret room for 3 whole days, and there was no news at all. How could he not be anxious? Below the Ice Palace, in the secret room deep inside the mountain, it was covered by a soundproof enchantment. At this moment, inside the soundproof enchantment, the smell of blood was so strong that it was pungent, and there was an endless, mournful scream, which made one's hair stand on end. Bing Chengzi looked at Yin Zhuixing, who was in a small blood pool in front of him, with a solemn face. The one who was screaming was none other than Yin Zhuixing himself. Yin Zhuixing's naked body was soaked in the blood pool, and the blood had submerged up to his chest. He was crazily shaking his head and screaming in the blood pool. His face was hideous, and he seemed to be in extreme pain. At the place where one of his arms was cut off, more than half of his arm had already grown out. At the place where his arm was cut off, There were red granules wriggling disgustingly, like a pile of earthworms, which was disgusting to look at. He was using the blood demon body refining technique to regrow his lost arm. Even though Bing Chengzi had a firm mind, after listening to Yin Juexing's mournful scream for a whole day, he couldn't help but frown. However, for Yin Juexing's safety, he had to protect him personally. He really couldn't let any accidents happen to him. Speaking of which, he had to thank Bai Changchun for successfully saving Yin Juexing this time. If it wasn't for Bai Changchun going to the East Holy Land and keeping all the forces quiet, it would have been really difficult for him to successfully bring Yin Juexing back. After receiving the distress message from Yin Juexing, who was forced into a corner, he rushed over at top speed. Coincidentally, the Spirit Fong Valley was conducting a large-scale search of the mountain. The seriously injured Yin Juexing was hiding here and there, not knowing where to hide. Bing Chengzi's timely appearance resolved the crisis. With his profound cultivation, he quietly brought Yin Juexing back. In fact, Yin Juexing had to thank Third Xian for escaping capture. If it wasn't for Third Xian's familiarity with the terrain of the Spirit Fong Valley and helping Yin Juexing hold on until Bing Chengzi arrived, he would still be in trouble. Speaking of which, Bing Chengzi still had to thank one person, and that was Wen Lanfeng. Fortunately, Wen Lanfeng only cared about Lu Yanqing and kept her company. If Wen Lanfeng had also participated in the search of the mountain, Bing Chengzi's movements would probably not have escaped Wen Lanfeng's notice. All these coincidences could only mean that Yin Juexing was not fated to die. A day later, the scream in the secret room disappeared. In the blood pool, Yin Juexing, who was covered in blood, opened his healthy arms and laughed wildly without concealment. After calming down, Yin Juexing bowed to Bing Chengzi and said, "Thank you for saving me, master. Otherwise, Juexing would not have been able to escape. You should have used the protective jade pendant I gave you earlier. Why did you have to use it only when you had no other choice?" Bing Chengzi casually scolded him and did not say much. But then he slightly frowned and said, "Your cultivation? Why did it drop?" Although the blood demon body refining technique has the magical function of reattaching broken limbs, it also causes great damage to the cultivation. It is expected that my cultivation would drop from the middle stage of crossing calamity to the early stage. But I hate it. If it wasn't for you, Qinshou, how could I do this? Yin Juexing suddenly opened his arms and roared madly. "You Qinshou, I will not let you go." Unfortunately, Yu Qinshou could not hear this sentence. Otherwise, he would definitely jump up and say, "Who's afraid of who?" Because he did not expect Yin Juexing to let him go. Since they were sworn enemies, he would continue to fight to the death. In the big house of the demon ghost region, Yu Qinshou was lying on the ground, but there was an elastic thigh under his head which belonged to Miss Mu. At this time, Miss Mu was carrying a plate of red fruits, picking them one by one and sending them to Yu Qinshou's mouth. The latter smacked his lips a few times, waved his hand to stop the hands that continued to send him red fruits, and got up with a sigh. He leaned against the door frame weakly, spat out the fruit skin, and looked around aimlessly. He was really bored out of his wits. He had no choice. Although there were beauties serving him and his life was comfortable, there were only 2 people on the island. After a few days, he found that he was bored out of his mind. As a new official, he also wanted to guard the demon ghost region majestically like Bai Changchun and have a taste of being a torture envoy. But now he found that it was a mistake to learn from Bai Changchun. Bai Changchun could stay here year after year, but he found that he lost his patience after only a few days. How is this different from being in jail? In jail, many of his cellmates would brag, but Miss Mu was not one to brag. "I wonder if Master has left." Yu Qinshou leaned against the door frame like a resentful woman and muttered to himself, then disappeared. Teleportation. Miss Mu's expression turned serious. The new torture envoy had indeed concealed his cultivation on purpose. He was not as superficial as he usually appeared, but had hidden his strength well. In the vast EC, there was an island named Xianxian. It was the territory of Nanming ancestor, one of the four great men of the cultivation world. It was shrouded in smoke all year round, and the red light shone without end, and the sound of knocking could be heard. On the main peak of Xianxian Island, by Changchun, dressed in a green robe, stood alone with his hands behind his back. His eyes were slightly closed on his thin face. He was waiting quietly, waiting for the opening of the East Holy Land. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and slowly turned around. He frowned and said, "What are you doing here?" A person suddenly appeared behind him. At this moment, he was frozen on the spot like a fossil, not moving at all. Even his eyeballs could not move. This person was none other than Yu Qianqiu. After finding his master's location, he had just appeared, and before he could react, he immediately discovered that the surrounding air currents had suddenly moved. They pressed down on him like metal, making him unable to move. He did not even have a chance to resist. This was because Bai Changchun had discovered it early. Otherwise, if someone had suddenly appeared behind him, and he did not stop in time, Yu Qianqiu might have become a meat patty. The air currents that clamped down on him loosened, and Yu Qianqiu regained his freedom. He quickly panted and said, "Master, I'm here to send you off. Why did you attack me?" He was full of resentment, and it felt like his kindness was taken as malicious intent. However, he did not think about it. In this world, who could get close to Bai Changchun without being discovered? He had suddenly appeared out of thin air in Utopia and got close to Bai Changchun. Thus, Bai Changchun had subconsciously treated him as an expert and reacted immediately. Luckily, he had stopped in time and did not cause any mishaps. Bai Changchun had never wasted his breath on such topics, and he could not be bothered to explain to him. He asked expressionlessly, "Is this the miraculous effect you mentioned when you gave me those silver balls?" Chapter 706. Yes, Master. Yu Qianqiu's face was full of pride, as if he was asking, "Awesome, right?" Bai Changchun nodded slightly and turned around expressionlessly, as if he had no interest in this kind of thing. This immediately dampened Yu Qianqiu's enthusiasm. If anyone knew that the golden bead had such a magical function, wouldn't they ask until the very end? Who would be as indifferent as him? Whoosh, whoosh. A gust of wind from the south suddenly blew, and the hazy red fog that enveloped the island slowly drifted to the north. Yu Qianqiu stood behind Bai Changchun and looked around. The fog dispersed. His vision gradually became clear, and the appearance of the entire Xianxian island appeared in front of him. "Master, is this Xianxian island?" Yu Qianqiu looked around and asked. Bai Changchun softly replied with a hum. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu's pupil shrank. Bai Changchun was facing the east, and there was a vast expanse of white fog. It was boundless, and it was connected to the sea and the sky. No one knew how big the area was. Compared to this boundless sea of fog, Xianxian Island was probably not even a small place. The two were separated by the sea, and the distance between them might be less than 10 miles. The wind blew away the surrounding fog, but it couldn't blow away the vast sea of fog in front of it. It was ethereal, serene, and mysterious. "That is the East Holy Land?" Yu Qianqiu murmured. Bai Changchun once again replied with a hum and looked down the mountain. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously followed his gaze and saw two figures rushing over. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the top of the mountain. When one of them saw Yu Qianqiu, he and Yu Qianqiu spoke at the same time. "Why are you here?" This person was none other than Nongzhu. After he made arrangements for Zi, Yi, and Furong, he immediately rushed over here. However, after the two of them asked, they didn't reply and turned their heads to the side like enemies. The man standing next to Nongzhu was sizing up Yu Qianqiu, and Yu Qianqiu was also attracted by his weird costume. It was a tall, barefooted old man. His face was old, but his body was muscular and his skin was bronze. His face was full of whiskers, each strand of hair standing straight up like a hedgehog. What was even more spectacular was that his hair, beard, and eyebrows were all crimson red. He was only wearing a pair of large underpants, and the underpants were also red. He had the appearance of a strange person. The old man opened his big eyes and looked at Yu Qianqiu curiously. Nongzhu, who is this? I don't think I've seen him before. He looks unfamiliar. He found it strange. There were only a handful of people in the world who were qualified to stand beside Bai Changchun and speak. Furthermore, this person looked so young, and he immediately suspected that he was Bai Changchun's disciple. Nongzhu chuckled and said, "Old man Nan Ming, take a guess." His words immediately confirmed Yu Qianqiu's guess. He immediately bowed and said, "Junior Yu Qianqiu greets Nan Ming ancestor." Nan Ming ancestor was stunned for a moment. Then he laughed and said, "I knew it. No wonder you're Bai Changchun's disciple. No wonder you could break into Xian Island without being discovered. I was reckless." Yu Qianqiu was unusually humble. Nan Ming ancestor waved his hand and said, "It's all right, it's all right. I've long heard of your name. Now that I've seen you today, you really live up to your reputation." He was a little tired. Why couldn't he see through his cultivation? Nongzhu also felt that it was a little strange. With Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, he shouldn't be able to hide from the protection of Xian Island, right? Nan Ming ancestor was a straightforward person. He couldn't figure it out, so he couldn't help but ask, "Yu Qianqiu, what's your cultivation? I'm a little clumsy to not be able to see through your cultivation." Nongzhu chuckled and thought, it would be strange if you could see through it. Even Bai Changchun couldn't see through it. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at him. He then took out a porcelain bottle from his storage bag and respectfully gave it to Nan Ming ancestor. He said, "I've just arrived here, so I didn't prepare anything because I came in a hurry. Here is a bottle of breath-concealing pill that I personally refined. After taking one, you can hide your cultivation for 10 days. I have no respect for you. It's just a breath-concealing pill, so please accept it." Nan Ming ancestor revealed an expression of understanding. At the same time, he was very satisfied with this kid who gave him a gift as soon as he met him. He then reached out to take it and said, "Then I won't stand on ceremony. If you have time, come to Xian Island to play." Although breath-concealing pill wasn't a miraculous pill, it was a rare item that had long been lost. With a bottle in hand, it might come in handy in the future. Naturally, he had to accept it. Nongzhu, who was at the side, was unhappy. She pulled a long face and said in a deep voice, "You promised to give me a bottle, but you haven't given it to me yet. Are you going to drag it until—" Before he could finish, Yu Qianqiu threw a porcelain bottle at him and stopped him from talking nonsense. Nan Ming ancestor raised his red eyebrows. He could tell that these two guys didn't get along. Coincidentally, he and Nongzhu didn't get along well either. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." He immediately laughed and patted Yu Qianqiu's shoulder, praising, "Not bad, not bad." Half of Yu Qianqiu's body trembled from the slap, but he still squeezed out an awkward smile and said, "Senior, you flatter me, you flatter me." Bai Changchun quietly faced the vast sea of fog, turning a deaf ear to the conversation between the three. 100 miles away from Xian Island, there were more than 10 large flying artifacts floating in the sky and sea. These flying magic tools were all Soul Formation stage lords from various countries. There were more than 100 of them, and they were all gathered together in their respective circles. For example, Pei Fong, Qi Jujuan, and Ouyangda were all there. The blue sky and white clouds floated, and the blue sea surged. The scenery was really good. However, everyone's attention wasn't on this. Most of the time, they were focused on the vast sea of fog between the blue sea and blue sky. However, they didn't see any movement until now. Ouyangda, who was standing side by side with Pei Fong and Qi Jujuan, suddenly turned around and walked away. He flicked his sleeves and said, "When is this damn East Holy Land going to open? We've waited for more than 10 days. Why is there still no movement?" Pei Fong squinted his eyes and looked into the distance. He hugged his stomach and laughed. "Old Ouyang, don't be impatient. Isn't Bai Changchun already at Xianxian Island? Since he's here, it means that the East Holy Land is going to open soon. Qi Jiujuan turned around expressionlessly and said, "We've already waited for so many years. Why would we care about waiting for a few more days?" He had always been like this. No matter what, there's almost no expression on his face. Although the three of them had been together for a long time, their temperaments and personalities had never been affected by one another. Pei Fong always had a smile on his face. The other two didn't talk much, but Ouyangda's temper was a little fiery, and Qi Jiujuan's thoughts were always hard to guess. He was always cold and calm. There was no one else on the flying artifact that the three demigod final stage experts were on. Under normal circumstances, there weren't many people qualified to stand with them. If they weren't summoned by them, how many people would be able to participate in the conversation between the three of them? The former top 10 experts were now incomplete. Of course, Bai Changchun was an exception, because the situation was just the opposite. It wasn't that Bai Changchun wasn't qualified to talk to the three of them, but the three of them weren't qualified to talk to Bai Changchun. As for the others, when Lan Feng and Bing Qingzi didn't come, the one who came, Hu Changshou, was standing with a group of demigod mid-stage lords with a gloomy face. However, he didn't seem to have anything in common with them, so it was very awkward. Huh, look at how ugly Hu Changshou's face is. Pei Fong glanced at them and laughed. The other two looked over as well, and they snorted disdainfully at this moment. The 100 or so spirit-severing lords all turned around to look at the source of the voice. They saw a dense group of flying artifacts coming from behind. Everyone looked at each other. Someone asked curiously, "Why are there so many people? Who's here to join in the fun?" Everyone was confused. Obviously, they didn't know. However, when those flying artifacts got closer, the demigod lords were speechless. There were at least 300 to 400 flying artifacts, and the cultivation of the people standing on them was too low for them to look at. The highest cultivation was at the end of the tribulation passing stage, and there were many at the tribulation passing stage. There were also many at the nascent soul stage. Everyone looked at each other and asked each other which sect they were from, but they all shook their heads, indicating that they didn't know them. Suddenly, someone said in surprise, "Look at their clothes. They seem to be from the Huaxia cultivation world." On one of the artifacts, Yunantan, who was dressed in a snow-white fluffy robe, walked to the back of the ship and asked indifferently, "Who are you? Come forward and answer me." Although his voice was soft, it penetrated the group of people who were dozens of meters away. Those people seemed to stop when they saw the people here. They all looked surprised because no one could see the cultivation of any of the people on the flying artifacts in front of them. When they heard the question, they gathered again. When they were about 10 meters away, a flying artifact appeared with 5 to 6 people on it. It was the people from Fuxian Island. Feng Xiangtian walked to the front of the ship and forced himself to calm down. He cupped his hands and said, "I'm Feng Xiangtian, the sect leader of Fuxian Island. I'm here to send off Senior Bai. May I know who you are?" He had already vaguely guessed who these people were. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't afraid, but he was the sect leader of the number 1 sect in Huaxia. How could he show weakness in front of everyone? As soon as he finished speaking, the lords of the various countries burst into laughter, all of them shaking their heads with mocking expressions. The hundreds of people didn't care about the thousands of people standing in front of them at all. Someone even insulted, "They really don't know what's good for them. How dare they come here to die?" The elegant Yunnan Tian looked back at the person who spoke and realized that it was Yin Ji from Xiushui country. He sneered, "Yin Ji, if you really have the ability, why don't you go out and kill them all now? It's a piece of cake to kill them." Yin Ji was suddenly stunned. Then he flew into a rage and said, "Yunnan Tian, what do you mean?" Yunnan Tian said with a faint smile, "I don't mean anything. I just want to fulfill your wish. If you don't dare to, don't say such shameless words." Yin Ji wanted to say something, but was stopped by Hua Zongming and the others. Bai Changchun hadn't left yet. If Yin Ji started killing the people of Huaxia cultivation world now, Bai Changchun would probably start killing soon. Chapter 707. Yunnan Tian ignored Yin Ji and turned to Feng Xiangtian with a smile. So your Huaxia cultivators, please go ahead. He didn't introduce himself and everyone else, as he didn't want to waste time talking. After all, the difference in cultivation was too big. The so-called supporting Immortal Island Sect leader wasn't even worth mentioning in his eyes. But then again, with his identity, he was already very cultured to speak so politely to Feng Xiangtian. Although he didn't say everyone's identity, Feng Xiangtian and the others already knew. Especially when the two of them were arguing just now. Yunnan Tian and Yin Ji's names made the Huaxia cultivators' hearts jump. These were the names of the soul formation realm lords of the various countries. Then I won't disturb you all. Feng Xiangtian didn't dare to show any temper. He cupped his hands at Yunnan Tian and the others respectfully. He led the group of people and turned, wanting to go around these terrifying people. The various countries' lords looked at these Huaxia cultivators who were trembling like chickens and sneered. It wasn't convenient to touch them now, but once Bai Changchun went to the East Holy Land, these people would undoubtedly be lambs waiting to be slaughtered. They wouldn't be able to run even if they wanted to. Hua Zongming, who was holding Yin Ji, looked at the Huaxia cultivators floating away in front of him expressionlessly. However, his eyes suddenly lit up. He saw that there were several women standing on one of the flying artifacts. One of them was a woman dressed in white. She was a rare beauty in this world. He couldn't help but shout, "Stop!" The various countries' lords all looked at Hua Zongming. Yin Ji, who was beside him, was even more confused. This guy told him that now wasn't the time to cause trouble. So why did he start again? The Huaxia cultivators all stopped in fear. The leading flying artifact from supporting Immortal Island floated back. Feng Xiangtian braced himself and asked Hua Zongming, "May I know what advice this senior has for us?" He had no choice but to stand up for Hua Zongming. After all, he was the sect master of the #1 sect. Hua Zongming, who was wearing light yellow thin clothes and barefooted, waved his hand in an elegant manner and said, "It's none of your business." His eyes were fixed on the beautiful woman in the crowd. Everyone followed his gaze and suddenly came to a realization. He must have seen a stunning beauty. No wonder. It must be known that Hua Zongming was a person who was famous for his love for beauties. His great light palace was called a den of lust behind his back because he kept many beautiful women. It wasn't hard to guess what he liked by looking at his clothes that didn't fit his style. In fact, it wasn't just Hua Zongming. Many people's eyes lit up when they saw that woman. That woman was none other than the leader of the Moon Clan, Qianhua Fairy. She was famous for her looks in the cultivation world of Huaxia. This was also because Bai Hua Fairy wasn't here, otherwise a pair of beauties would definitely be a feast for the eyes. Jade Flower Fairy's expression changed slightly. She naturally noticed Hua Zongming's lecherous gaze, and he was not the only one. Although she was angry, she was even more terrified because she couldn't afford to offend anyone here. He could only tilt his head to the side and pretend that he didn't see anything. The reason why the Huaxia cultivators were here was naturally because they heard that Bai Changchun was going to the Eastern Holy Land. Therefore, the leaders of the various sects contacted each other and came together to see him off, to thank Bai Changchun for protecting the Huaxia cultivation world for so many years. Of course, this was just a nice thing to say. The main reason was that every torture master of the Ghost region was a top expert who could shake the cultivation world. The next torture master would probably be no worse. The hundreds of sect leaders had come here and put on such a grand show because they wanted to show respect to Senior Bai. Or rather, they wanted to play the pity card, hoping that Senior Bai could speak to the next enforcer and continue to protect the world of cultivators in Huaxia. According to their thinking, since Bai Changchun could take care of the Huaxia cultivation world for so many years, it was obvious that he had deep feelings for the Huaxia cultivation world. They believed that if they came together to beg him, he wouldn't really ignore them. Therefore, this scene happened. However, their thinking was just wishful thinking. Bai Changchun didn't take care of the Huaxia cultivation world like they thought. First of all, when they saw Bai Changchun later, it was still uncertain whether he would talk to them or not. Second, once Bai Changchun left, it would be difficult for them to leave this place safely. Jade Flower Fairy had just turned her head to one side when a white figure suddenly appeared in front of her. She was a little surprised, but then she saw clearly who it was. It was the elegant man in a fluffy white robe who talked to Feng Xiangtian just now. He was looking at her deeply. Jade Flower Fairy was suddenly at a loss. She couldn't scold him, let alone beat him. "Sorry to disturb you, Fairy." Yunantian bowed politely and said, "I am Yunantian, the Lord of Lu Nanhua. It is my honor to meet you today. I wonder if I have the honor to know your name?" Jade Flower Fairy bit her lips and bowed. "I am Jade Flower, the leader of the Moon Clan. Nice to meet you, Senior." Hua Zoming's face darkened. He didn't expect that Yunantian would take advantage of him after he stopped these people. Among the lords, many people were already snickering. They all knew that Yunantian was not a good guy. There was a reason why he only accepted female disciples in his clan. Those who knew the truth all knew that the relationship between Yunantian and the female disciples he accepted was not clear. It was just that, apart from cultivators at the last stage of the semi-god realm, Yunantian's cultivation was considered high compared to the other lords. Everyone gave him some face, and few people talked nonsense. Yunantian really doesn't change. Pei Fong smiled at Qi Jujuan and Ouyangda, who were beside him. He then shouted loudly, "Brother Yu, calm down for the time being. If there is anything, we can talk about it later. Please come over and have a chat." He did not want Yunantian to cause any trouble now, lest everyone was implicated. Yunantian glanced at Pei Fong and bowed to Jade Flower Fairy. "Oh, the famous Jade Flower Fairy. Nice to meet you. I will talk to you again when I have the chance." After that, he stepped back and teleported to the flying ritual implement where Pei Fong was. He glared at Pei Fong and said grumpily, "What's the matter?" Pei Fong shouted to the people of the Huaxia cultivation world, "Let's go. Don't make trouble for yourselves." As soon as he spoke, no one stopped the Huaxia cultivators. A group of people quickly flew away. At this time, Pei Fong turned to Yunantian and said with a smile, "Brother Yu, in terms of appearance, who in the world can compare to Lu Yanqing?" As soon as these words came out, many people couldn't help but burst into laughter. Everyone knew that Yunantian had once pursued Lu Yanqing. Unfortunately, he was beaten up by his rival in love, Wen Lanfeng, and almost lost his life. From then on, Yunantian didn't dare to provoke Lu Yanqing anymore. Pei Fong was obviously exposing his shortcomings. Yunantian snorted coldly and flashed back to his original position. At this moment, everyone's laughter stopped abruptly, and they looked around. The whistling sound of the wind gradually became louder, and the blowing sea breeze suddenly became stronger. The strange thing was that this wind wasn't from the north, south, east, or west. It was a little messy, and it became more and more vigorous. When it blew on their faces, it felt like something was slapping their faces. The blue sea below lost its rhythm and gradually became turbulent. Just as everyone was looking at each other in dismay, they suddenly heard the faint rumbling of thunder coming from all around them. Everyone quickly looked around and saw dark clouds coming from the horizon. They came from all directions and seemed to be gathering in this direction. Under the dark clouds, ferocious thunderbolts, dragons, snakes, and flood dragons were shining brightly. They connected the sea and the dark clouds in the sky and were moving quickly. The wind became stronger and was close to a storm. The sea was completely angry and set off monstrous waves. "The East Holy Land is about to open," Pei Fong said with a smile on his face. What he meant was that Bai Changchun was finally leaving. Ouyangda and Qi Jujuan nodded slightly. Many people present had seen the opening of the East Holy Land. They all understood that this was a sign of the opening of the East Holy Land. However, none of the Huaxia cultivators had seen it before. Just as they were dozens of miles away from the feudal lords, they suddenly saw such a change in the sky and sea. All of them looked around in bewilderment. The fog that had just shrouded Xian Island was blown away again. Bai Changchun, who was standing on the peak of the mountain, slowly opened his eyes and looked around with radiance. Nongzhu looked at the dark clouds in the sky and muttered to herself, Is it going to open soon? Grandmaster Nanming nodded solemnly and said soon. He had lived on Xian Island for such a long time and had seen the opening of the East Holy Land several times. What he said was naturally correct. When Yu Qianzhou heard this, he looked around curiously. He wanted to see how the Holy Land of the East would be opened. Right at this moment, the thunderbolts in the surrounding dark clouds suddenly disappeared at the same time. The wind between heaven and earth swept wildly, and the surrounding dark clouds quickly gathered together. In less than an hour, the entire sky above Xian Island was covered by dark clouds. The last ray of light disappeared, and the world was so dark that one couldn't even see their own fingers. Not long after, thunder rumbled in the sky again, and it was getting more and more intense. The dark clouds in the sky flickered, as if they were brewing something. Suddenly, an intense and dazzling thunderbolt pierced through the dark clouds like a long sword and illuminated the entire world. The dark sky was shrouded by the rolling dark clouds, and the turbulent sea reflected the strong light. Then, a loud bang was heard. It was so loud that even the ground could feel the strong tremors. Yu Qianzhou gritted his teeth and felt that he couldn't hear anything. However, his eyes were still wide open as he looked at the place where the thunderbolt struck. It was the clouds that shrouded the East Holy Land. No matter how strong the wind was, in the instant that the huge thunderbolt disappeared into the clouds, the world returned to darkness. However, Yu Qianzhou could faintly see that the moment the light disappeared, the unmoving clouds seemed to move. Chapter 708. Bang! With a loud explosion, another huge thunderbolt appeared in the dark clouds. The direction it struck was exactly where the previous thunderbolt struck. With the help of the strong light, one could see that the clouds shrouding the eastern sacred land, which could not be blown away by the wind, were slowly surging. Before the dazzling light disappeared, another shocking thunderbolt struck at the same location. Once the 3 thunderbolts appeared, it was as if a fuse had been lit. In an instant, the sky was filled with lightning and thunder. Densely packed green electric snakes flashed in the dark clouds and interweaved like a net. The scene was extremely shocking. Under the lightning, Xian Island was completely lit up. The surrounding sea surface was filled with billowing green light. At this moment, the dark clouds in the sky shouldn't be called dark clouds, but lightning clouds. They were formed by dense lightning. Countless densely packed lightning bolts shot towards the sky above Xian Island and converged into a gigantic thunderbolt. Bang! Once again, the target was the same as the previous 3 lightning bolts. Yu Qianzhou's eyes widened as he personally saw the clouds shrouding the eastern sacred land, rotating slowly. Suddenly, as if the speed of rotation was too slow, earth-shattering explosions resounded. Countless lightning snakes gathered to form huge thunderbolts. They crazily struck out one after another. More and more of them appeared, and the frequency of the strikes also became denser and denser. This scene reminded Yu Qianzhou of a dozen heavy machine guns bombarding the same target. Other than the continuous loud explosion, nothing else could be heard. The dark clouds had turned into a world of thunder and lightning. The lightning shot out wildly, and everywhere was covered in a vast expanse of green. The 4 people on the main peak of Xian Island could clearly feel the entire mountain beneath their feet shaking. Rocks of all sizes on the mountain were rolling down the mountain. This was because they were not ordinary people. Their cultivation was not weak, and they could circulate their energy to resist the tremors. If it was an ordinary person, they would have died from the tremors. Yu Qianzhou, whose cultivation was inferior, had already used his fingers to block his ears. Otherwise, he would not have been able to bear it. Even so, he still felt a little dizzy. He felt that his surroundings were filled with electromagnetism. All the hair on his body stood on end, as if there was an electric current flowing on the surface of his body. Although the Huaxia cultivators, who were dozens of kilometers away, were already very far away, they could still imagine the shocking scene in that place. All of them were dumbfounded as they looked at the shocking scene in the distance. Suddenly, someone noticed that hundreds of figures were flying towards the place where the lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The lords of the various countries had already kept their flying artifacts and were flying over quickly. They gathered at a spot several miles away from Xian Island and hovered in the air, looking at the might of the world before them. Even though this was not the first time they had seen it, they still felt their hearts tremble. In that instant, they felt how insignificant they were. In the face of the might of heaven and earth, no matter how high his cultivation was, he was nothing more than an ant in this world. The continuous thunderbolts continued for nearly an hour before they finally calmed down. The wind between the sea and the sky was getting fiercer and fiercer. That was because a huge whirlpool had formed in the sky where the lightning struck. It produced a powerful suction force and stirred up the surrounding airflow. By Changchun, Grandmaster Nanming and Nongzhu were like nails nailed to the mountain peak, not moving an inch. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He could not withstand it with his cultivation. He lost his center of gravity due to the strong wind. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and he felt like he was about to float away with the wind. Nongzhu looked at his bewildered expression and laughed sinisterly. At this moment, Grandmaster Nanming's bear-like palm pressed on Yu Qianqiu's shoulder. A warm current flowed into Yu Qianqiu's body, and he immediately stood firmly on the spot like a stake. Yu Qianqiu finally relaxed and could enjoy the scenery with peace of mind. The dense lightning in the dark clouds gradually died out, and the last ray of light between the heavens and the earth disappeared as well. Once again, they were plunged into complete darkness. All that was left in the surroundings was the strong wind blowing ceaselessly. However, Yu Qianqiu could clearly feel that the strong wind was slowly rising into the sky. The sound of the surging waves seemed to be gradually calming down, and it was no longer as impatient. At this moment, Grandmaster Nanming withdrew his palm from Yu Qianqiu's shoulder. Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand to feel up and down in the darkness. The wind was indeed much weaker, and the whistling sound reached the sky. Ouch! Yu Qianqiu cried out in pain. In the darkness, Nongzhu said angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, is there something wrong with you? How dare you touch my butt?" Yu Qianqiu hurriedly explained, "Don't misunderstand. I don't have that kind of hobby. I really didn't do it on purpose. I just wanted to feel the wind, and I accidentally touched you." Amidst their whispers, Grandmaster Nanming's laughter could be heard. "Wah, old man Nanming!" Nongzhu screamed as her, but was pinched by someone. "Don't misunderstand. I didn't do it on purpose. I just wanted to feel the wind," Grandmaster Nanming snickered. Amidst the crackling noises, Nanming ancestors' blood-curdling screams could be heard. Nongzhu roared in anger. "You King feel the wind. Is it something you pinched with your hands?" Yu Qianqiu quickly moved away to avoid being affected by the two people. Not long after, a bright white light appeared in the surrounding horizon, and it was expanding rapidly. The dark clouds in the sky were shrinking rapidly. In less than an hour, light once again shone on this part of the sea. The eastern sacred land was originally shrouded in white fog, but now a black whirlpool appeared in the sky. It sucked in the dark clouds that were as thick as ink, like a tornado pillar. The area of the dark clouds in the sky became smaller and smaller, and they were gradually swallowed by the black whirlpool. After a while, the last piece of dark cloud was sucked in by the whirlpool. The sky returned to being bright and sunny, and the blue waves of the sea rippled normally. The only difference was that above the eastern sacred land, in the whirlpool that was dozens of meters wide, a dense electric web suddenly appeared. It was like a huge beast opening its fangs to devour. After more than 300 years, the eastern sacred land is finally opened. Grandmaster Nanming let out a long sigh. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and saw that his red hair and red beard had become messy as if someone had pulled them. Needless to say, it was definitely done by the furious Nongzhu. There were also many footprints on the buttocks of his red underpants. He reckoned that Nongzhu had something to do with them. Yu Qianqiu didn't have the mood to pay too much attention to this. He looked at the whirlpool that gathered lightning and said in a daze, "This whirlpool is the entrance to the Eastern Sacred Land?" Grandmaster Nanming nodded and said, "That's right. An entrance with no exit can only be maintained for a period of time. After 6 hours, it will automatically close and return to normal. If you want to enter again, you have to wait for the next opening in 300 years. The three of them looked at Bai Changchun at the same time. They saw Bai Changchun, who was standing with his hand behind his back, slowly turn around and stare behind him expressionlessly. The three of them followed his gaze and immediately noticed the group of people several miles away. The cultivation of that group of people wasn't weak. They immediately noticed Bai Changchun looking at them, and they looked at each other guiltily. Pei Fong's fat face twitched, and he smiled awkwardly at the crowd. "Bai Changchun is leaving. Let's send him off." With him in the lead, more than 100 people quickly flew over. The space at the top of the main peak was limited, and it couldn't accommodate more than 100 people. Furthermore, they didn't dare to stand together with Bai Changchun, so they all landed at the foot of the main peak. All of them sneaked glances at Bai Changchun, but to their surprise, they realized that Yu Qianqiu was actually standing next to Bai Changchun. Grandmaster Nanming and Nongzhu were still acceptable, but that guy had such a big responsibility. Why did he have to stand next to Bai Changchun? Yu Qianqiu stared at the group of soul-forming experts below him, and he felt very pleased. The feeling of looking down at a group of soul-forming experts from high position was very, very satisfying. Pei Fong cupped his broken palm and said with a smile, "We learned that Brother Bai is leaving, so we specially came to send you off. Nanming, Nongzhu, you're here too. Yo, Brother Yu Qianqiu is here too." Bai Changchun's sharp gaze swept across the people below, and finally, he stared at Pei Fong. He said lightly, "Pei Fong, are you the leader?" His indifferent words immediately scared Pei Fong so much that cold sweat broke out on his back. There were too many meanings in his words, and it was easy for people to misunderstand. Pei Fong's expression changed, and he immediately waved his hand and said, No, we all agreed to come together. We thought that you were going to leave, so we all thought that we should send you off." As he said this, he turned around and asked the people behind him, "What do you think, everyone?" Yes, yes, yes. We should send him off." The group of people replied meekly. None of them dared to raise their voices. Looking at the situation, the people standing at the front couldn't wait to shrink back even more. Now, this was majestic. He could scare a group of soul-forming experts like grandchildren. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, and he looked at Bai Changchun with great admiration. Nongzhu, an ancestor of Nanming, looked at each other and shook their heads slightly. Bai Changchun's despotic power had suppressed everyone for too long, causing everyone to be afraid to the bone. One wrong look from him could immediately make a group of people tremble with fear. "In that case, should I thank you for your kindness?" Bai Changchun asked lightly. No need. Pei Fong squeezed out a smile on his fat face, and he waved his hand repeatedly and said, "We've all been in the cultivation world for so many years. It's only right for us to send you off. It's only right." At this moment, Bai Changchun suddenly looked far away. Everyone followed his gaze and saw a group of densely packed flying artifacts carrying a group of people flying over quickly. It was the group of people from the cultivation world of Huaxia. Led by Feng Xiangtian of Fuxian Island, hundreds of Sect masters gathered. The closer they got to Xian Island, the faster their hearts beat. The legendary #1 expert in the world should be in front, but no one had seen him before. When everyone got closer and saw the group of lords on the main peak, they couldn't help but look at the 4 people standing on the peak. To be able to make the lords of the soul-forming realm submit to them, they were naturally extraordinary. Among them, there must be the legendary #1 expert in the world. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.